In 1994, the discovery of 5 lifeless bodies inside a large house in New Zealand became one of the strangest and most expensive criminal cases the country had ever faced. David Bain was the eldest son and the only survivor of the incident. Shockingly, David was later charged with 5 counts of murder, accused of killing his entire family. He was only 22 years old at the time. But if you think that's where the story ends, think again. 19 years later, David walked free, and the reason why is astonishing. It's one of those cases that makes you question everything. Trust me, you'll want to grit your teeth and hang on until the very end. But before we dive into the shocking twists and turns, let's first take a closer look at the Bain family, the people at the heart of this chilling mystery. By all appearances, the Bain family seemed like a typical religious family. David Cullen Bain was born on March 27, 1972, the first child of Robin Bain and Margaret Bain. His parents had married 3 years earlier. In 1969, they were deeply rooted in their faith, hoping for a peaceful, close-knit family life. But life had other plans. When David was 2 years old, Robin felt called to be a missionary teacher, so the family moved far away from home. The Bains uprooted their lives and moved over 3,000 miles northwest to Papua New Guinea. It was a massive change, from the familiar streets of New Zealand to the tropical and often challenging environment of a remote island nation. Their family grew. David became the eldest of 4 siblings, with 2 sisters, Arawa and Laniet, born 3 and 4 years after him. A younger brother, Stephen, arriving 8 years later. In many ways, this should have been a time of joy and growth, but beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. While Robin threw himself into his missionary work, Margaret's spiritual path began to shift. She became fascinated by New Age spiritualism and the idea of channeling spirits, a stark contrast to the traditional religious values the family was raised with. Margaret became convinced that their family was under threat from dark, satanic forces, and fiercely believed that they needed protection from these evil influences. This obsession caused stress and fear at home, creating a sense of discomfort that intensified as time passed. Additionally, Robin's enthusiasm for his missionary work started to fade after several years. The dream that had brought the family to Papua New Guinea began to lose its luster. By 1988, 14 years after their move, they returned to New Zealand. The family settled into a large house in Anderson's Bay, a quiet suburb on New Zealand's South Island. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but life at home was far from peaceful. In 1991, Robin took a job as the principal of a small rural school. On paper, this sounded promising: a stable job, a chance to rebuild a community. But things were deteriorating rapidly. By 1994, the marriage between Robin and Margaret was hanging by a thread. They argued constantly, daily fights that wore down the family's spirit. Margaret's bitterness toward Robin had deepened so much that she reportedly made chilling comments about wanting to kill him. The tension was strong, and they could feel it both emotionally and in the atmosphere of their home. Visitors described the Bain household as a pigsty. The once grand house had become run down and neglected. Broken windows, peeling paint, and clutter filled every corner. Unpleasant smells lingered in the air, a testament to the family's neglect and disarray. Robin was rarely there to help. During the week, he lived and slept in a caravan near the school, miles away from the chaos at home. On weekends, instead of joining the family inside, he stayed in another caravan parked in the garden. The emotional distance between the family members only grew wider. Worse, dark rumors swirled around Robin. There were whispers and accusations of abuse towards his youngest daughter. And yet, these claims cast a shadow over the family and would later become a key element in the case that shocked the nation. On the other hand, David's relationship with his father was tense and strained. In contrast, he was very close to his mother, Margaret, and they often shared grievances about Robin, united in their frustrations. At 22 years old in 1994, David was trying to find his way. He was a music student with dreams of becoming an opera singer. an ambitious goal that set him apart from the typical path his siblings were on. Whether or not he had the talent for international fame is up for debate, but David's passion for music was real. Now, despite the turmoil at home, all four Bain children were involved in school or work. Arawa was training to be a teacher, Stephen was finishing high school, and Laniet held a part-time job. However, David's path was a little more complicated. After struggling to fit in at university, he had dropped out for a time and even relied on unemployment benefits. But he eventually returned to university to study classical music, supporting himself by delivering newspapers in the early mornings, a humble job that required discipline and grit. By 1994, the bond between Robin and Margaret was not just broken, it was shattered beyond repair. Margaret had become really convinced that Robin was possessed by a demon she called Belial. She also referred to her husband as a son of Belial, one of the four crowned princes of hell. This wasn't some passing thought or simple fear, it was something she wrote about repeatedly in her diary, describing how she believed her husband was under the control of an evil spirit, that it cast a dark shadow over their home and tore the family apart. Margaret's attempts to rid Robin of this demon often took the form of exorcisms, rituals meant to drive the evil out. Robin's mental health suffered immensely under this strain. Colleagues at his school described him as a man who was depressed, withdrawn, and barely functioning, like a shell of the person he once was. Neglecting his own hygiene and appearing almost robotic, Robin seemed lost, trapped in a life that was falling apart around him. Meanwhile, the children found themselves caught in the middle of this toxic environment. David, Arawa, Laniet, and Stephen each had their own complicated relationships with their parents and with each other. Some children sided more with their mother, others were closer to their father. The house, already cluttered and chaotic, was filled with tension and emotional pain. It was clear that the family was on the brink of collapse. And then, on the morning of Monday, June 20th, 1994, the unimaginable happened. At exactly 7:09 in the morning, David Bain made a frantic call to emergency services. All dead. They're all dead. I can't believe they're all dead. David trying to explain what he had found in his own home. When police arrived, they were confronted with a scene so grim and tragic that it was almost unimaginable. David's mother, sisters, and youngest brother were all dead. His father lay in the lounge, a bullet wound to the head. The family rifle was on the floor beside him, and chillingly, a typed message on the computer read, "Sorry, you are the only one who deserves to stay." The family home was a mess, as usual, but now it was stained with loss and violence. All 5 members of the Bain family were dead, victims of a brutal shooting that shocked the entire nation. The question everyone wanted answered was, who did this and why? In the days following the massacre, more evidence emerged that suggested Robin, the father, might have been innocent after all. Remarkably, the only blood found on him was his own. There was none on his clothes, socks, or shoes which he had been wearing that day. This was puzzling because if Robin had been the killer and had then shot himself, one would expect at least some transfer of blood to his clothing or hands. Moreover, Robin's fingerprints were completely absent from the rifle found beside him, a fact that forensic experts found hard to reconcile. If Robin had fired the fatal shots and then turned the weapon on himself, his fingerprints should have been all over the gun. To complicate matters further, no gunpowder residue was detected on his hands, a forensic detail that contradicted the idea of him taking his own life. The initial theory seemed clear. The father, Robin, had killed his family before taking his own life. But this explanation quickly began to unravel. Forensic experts examined the bullet wound in Robin's head and declared it nearly impossible that he had shot himself. The trajectory and angle of the bullet, along with the blood patterns, suggested his body had been moved after death, casting doubt on the father theory. This twist in the investigation shifted suspicion towards David Bain. If Robin wasn't the killer, then why was David alive when everyone else in his family was dead? Why had he been spared to add to the growing mystery? David's story just didn't quite add up. When officers first questioned him, he explained that he had completed his usual newspaper round between 6 and 6:42 in the morning. This timeline seemed straightforward enough, and a neighbor even confirmed to police that they saw David entering the Bain property at around 6:40 a.m. But here's where things get strange. David didn't call for help until 7:09 a.m., a full 24 minutes after he supposedly returned home. What happened during that gap? When interrogated, David admitted he zoned out, unsure of what to do or how to react to the horror inside his own house. This delay immediately raised red flags for investigators, who wondered if something was being left out of his story. Adding more complexity to the case, David was unable to explain the fresh injuries on his forehead and knees. These wounds suggested some kind of recent struggle or accident, but he had no clear explanation. Even more incriminating was the fact that the gun found next to Robin's body actually belonged to David. He further admitted he was the only person who knew where the key to unlock the gun's safety mechanism was kept, making him the prime suspect in the eyes of the police. With this mounting suspicion, it didn't take long for the authorities to detain David. Merely 4 days after the horrific massacre, he was arrested and charged with the murders of his entire family. Digital forensics played a crucial role in unraveling the tangled timeline of that tragic morning. It was discovered that the computer on which the final letter was typed had been switched on at 6:44 a.m., just 2 minutes after David reportedly arrived home. This suggested that the note had been composed shortly after his return, seemingly placing him at the scene during the time of the killings. Despite all the mounting evidence casting doubt on Robin's guilt, the investigation took a dark turn just 17 days after the murders. The Bain family's relatives, deeply unsettled by the gruesome scene, decided to take drastic action. Relatives, worried about teenagers breaking in and accidentally causing a fire or other problems, asked for the house to be deliberately burned down in a safe, controlled manner. The decision was approved by David himself, who agreed to this controversial move. While it might seem illogical to burn down a crime scene, the family and authorities wanted to prevent further tragedy or vandalism. Within minutes, the old wooden Bain family home was engulfed in roaring flames. The blaze quickly consumed the house, erasing the physical space where such a horrific tragedy had unfolded. The house was consumed by towering flames for more than an hour. The fire could be seen over most of the city. It burned 17 days after Arawa, Laniet, and Stephen were killed, along with parents Robin and Margaret. Still, with the house now reduced to ashes, the investigators could only rely on the evidence they had already gathered. No further forensic work could be done on the physical crime scene, as it no longer existed. How the family managed to get permission to burn down a crime scene so fast, or why anyone even thought it was a good idea, remains a total mystery. Despite all this, the wheels of justice kept turning. Almost 1 year to the day after the massacre, in May of 1995, David's trial finally began. Prosecutors came well prepared and carefully reconstructed a timeline of the horrific morning. According to their version, David woke at 5 a.m. to the familiar buzz of his alarm clock. After dressing, he put on a pair of white opera gloves, a strange and unsettling choice, and retrieved his rifle. Along with the ammunition from his wardrobe, using a spare key, he unlocked the gun's trigger lock, effectively readying himself for what would become a brutal and bloody spree. David systematically shot his mother, then his 2 sisters, and finally his younger brother. During a violent struggle with his brother Stephen, David lost a lens from his glasses and suffered several injuries himself. Blood from the victims soaked into David's clothes, a damning detail prosecutors emphasized to prove his involvement. Trying to cover his tracks, David supposedly threw the bloodied clothes into the washing machine, started a cycle, took a shower, and changed into fresh, clean clothes. These actions explain the pools of blood found scattered throughout the laundry room and bathroom, places no one would expect unless someone was desperately trying to erase evidence. After this cleanup, David reportedly went about his usual morning routine, leaving the house at 5:45 a.m. to deliver newspapers as if nothing was wrong. Upon returning home at approximately 6:42 a.m., he went upstairs and switched on the computer at 6:44 a.m., then typed a message. Then he waited for his father, Robin, to return. Robin was known to enter the house from his caravan at exactly 7 a.m. every morning to pray, and tragically, that day was no different. Prosecutors argued that David hid behind a curtain in the lounge, silently waiting for Robin to nearby. At that precise moment, he shot his father at point-blank range. Only then did he make the call to emergency services, feigning shock and despair. This call coincided with the 24-minute gap. David claimed he had zoned out, unsure of what to do next. Afterward, David allegedly staged the scene to make it look like Robin had taken his own life. But David tells a completely different story. He told the court that he had gotten up at his usual time, prepared for his paper route, and left the house with his dog. Upon returning around 6:42 a.m., he went straight to his room, took off his shoes, and went downstairs to wash his hands. While he admitted putting his clothes into the washing machine, he denied they had any blood on them. Heading back upstairs, he claimed he noticed bullets and the rifle's trigger lock lying on the floor. Frantically, he searched the house and found his mother, sisters, and brother all dead in their bedrooms. His father was also dead, lying in the lounge. According to David, he then zoned out for about 20 minutes before finally calling emergency services. Additionally, David's defense team proposed a shocking alternative, that Robin, the father, was actually the killer. According to their theory, Robin had killed his family before turning on the computer to type a message and then had taken his own life. It was a bold claim, but several parts of David's story just didn't add up. The prosecution, meanwhile, argued that David's motive was financial. They claimed he wanted to inherit the family fortune. His parents had put away a large sum of money intended for a new house. When the trial ended, David Bain was found guilty on all 5 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 16 years. Now, you might think the story ends there. A horrific family massacre, an obvious suspect, and a clear sentence. Case closed, but you'd be wrong. Over the months and years that followed, David Bain's case captivated many. News of the Bain family massacre spread like wildfire across the nation, and public opinion was sharply divided on who was truly to blame. One of David's most vocal supporters was Joe Karam, a former All-Black rugby star. After retiring from professional sports, Joe developed a deep interest in the case during his more relaxed years. Convinced of David's innocence, Joe became an outspoken advocate. Following David's sentencing, Joe visited him over 200 times in prison. He even wrote 4 books about the case, tirelessly researching and pressuring the justice system for a review. His efforts eventually led to a major breakthrough, an appeal to the Privy Council. This appeal, which began in May 2007, 12 years after David's initial imprisonment, was a monumental moment. The Privy Council, based in London, found that a serious miscarriage of justice had occurred. They ordered David's convictions to be quashed and scheduled a new trial. The council argued there was significant doubt David would have been convicted if crucial evidence, discovered after the original trial, had been presented to the jury. Much of this new evidence was information the jury had never even heard. For example, Dean Cottle, a friend of Laniet, revealed something explosive. According to Dean, Laniet had confided in him about an incestuous relationship with her father, Robin. Just days before the massacre, she had traveled home to confront the family with this horrific secret. This testimony suggested a possible motive for Robin, but the judge, in the original trial, ruled Dean's evidence as hearsay and labeled him an unreliable witness. As a result, this crucial information was suppressed and never reached the jury. As time passed, even more disturbing facts came to light. Robin had reportedly published brutal and sadistic stories written by his pupils in a school newsletter. One of these stories even involved A Fictional Family Massacre. A 46-page document detailed the many wrongdoings of the first trial, painting a clear picture of its inherent unfairness. None of this information was available to the jury in 1995, meaning David's defense team couldn't properly shift suspicion towards Robin. Consequently, David was granted bail and allowed to remain out of prison while awaiting the new trial. This brief taste of freedom, after spending over a decade behind bars, must have felt almost surreal. For 3 months, he lived with Joe Karam and then moved to Auckland. This fleeting liberty was likely a bittersweet experience, shadowed by the heavy knowledge that his nightmare was far from over. 2 years later, in March 2009, David's retrial commenced, forcing him and everyone connected to the case to relive the horrors once again. David pleaded not guilty to the 5 murder charges. Again, his defense argued that Robin, the father, was the true killer who had then turned the gun on himself. This time, however, the defense brought forward far more compelling evidence, suggesting why Robin might have committed such a chilling act. They detailed Robin's descent into a deep and morbid depression, his alarming behavior that concerned colleagues and friends, and most importantly, they uncovered the secret at the heart of it all, Laniet's dark and hidden truth, which she was allegedly ready to reveal to the family just before the massacre. This secret, steeped in horror and despair, painted a picture of a man pushed to the edge by desperation and shame. The retrial dragged on for 3 grueling months, filled with testimony, arguments, and re-examinations of every detail. Yet, despite the lengthy process, the jury's decision was astonishingly swift. Less than a day after deliberation, they returned with a unanimous verdict of not guilty. After spending 13 years in prison and 2 additional years under legal suspicion, David Bain was finally free. Since then, he has lived outside the prison walls, rebuilding his life piece by piece. However, the case continues to divide opinions sharply. There are still many details that make it hard for some to accept David's innocence. His bloody fingerprints were found on the murder weapon. Fresh injuries appeared on his body with no explanation, and Stephen's blood was discovered on clothes David had washed and denied having stained. What about the mysterious 20 minutes David claimed to have zoned out for? How does one explain that lapse during such a horrific day? More tellingly, experts have widely agreed that the angle of Robin's fatal wound made it almost impossible for him to have taken his own life. So, if Robin didn't kill himself, then who was responsible? Adding to the suspicion is the fact that David gave permission to burn down the family home, the very scene of the murders. To many, that act alone speaks volumes. Even David's girlfriend at the time said he had a premonition something terrible was about to happen shortly before the killings, which seems too coincidental to ignore. Yet, on the flip side, there are equally convincing reasons to believe Robin might have been the true culprit. Robin was reportedly deeply unhappy with his life, and if Laniet's secret was true, he could have been overwhelmed with panic and fear. Shell casings were found in his caravan, and the disturbing, sadistic stories revealed by his colleagues painted the portrait of a man unraveling mentally and emotionally. This case remains one of New Zealand's most polarizing, sparking intense debate over who truly committed the murders. The financial cost of this case was staggering. Taxpayers shelled out over $7 million, with the retrial alone costing more than $4 million, making it the most expensive trial in New Zealand's history. Joe Karam, David's unwavering advocate, lost over $500,000 personally supporting the cause. David himself sought compensation for his wrongful imprisonment. Given the high-profile nature of the case, New Zealand's Justice Minister brought in overseas judges to review the application. The review recommended compensation, but bureaucratic delays meant that the case was handed back and forth between ministers. 6 long years of red tape and delays passed before David was finally awarded $925,000 in 2016. During all this turmoil, David rebuilt his life. He found work as an engineer, fell in love, married, had a child, and legally changed his name. Rumor has it that the family eventually moved to Australia, perhaps to escape the long shadow cast by the case. As for the Bain family home, no trace remains of the original property that was burned down in 1994. The site has since been completely transformed into a landscaped, modern 3-bedroom house, erasing the physical memory of what happened there. Over the decades, the story of the Bain family massacre and all its related evidence has faded into the distant past, becoming almost like a dark legend whispered about but rarely confronted. On a cold December night in 2011, 13-year-old Erica Lynn Parsons vanished without a trace. Her parents claimed she had gone to live with her biological grandmother, but their story raised suspicions. As investigators began to dig deeper, unsettling details emerged: stories of bruises, unexplained absences, and a plastic tote that became impossible to overlook. What truly happened to Erica, and why did it take years for the truth to be revealed? This is a tragic story of a girl who was silenced, but whose story would not remain hidden. Erica Lynn Parsons was born on February 24, 1998, Carolyn Parsons' child. Carolyn separated from her husband, Steve, who was not the biological father, before Erica was born. Despite her small size, Erica was a lively baby. However, just days after her birth, Carolyn had to make a difficult decision due to financial struggles. She chose to put Erica up for adoption to give her daughter a better future. Although Erica's biological father was not in the picture, Carolyn's former brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Sandy and Casey Parsons, chose to adopt Erica. Erica became part of the Parsons family when she joined them at just 4 weeks old. Although the adoption was officially completed in 2000, Sandy later suggested that it actually took place in July instead of March. Casey Parsons happily remembered those early days, saying they had her from the time she was 4 weeks old. By the time the adoption was finalized, she was already calling them Mama and Daddy. They were the only parents she had known. Sandy and Casey had a tumultuous relationship. They got married in the early 1990s and had 3 children. However, their marriage was marred by incidents of domestic violence. Sandy was convicted of assaulting Casey in 1994 and 1997, leading to court-ordered probation and community service. Despite these challenges, they stayed together and welcomed another child, Erica, into their family. Concerns about Erica's safety arose in 2002 when social services started investigating allegations of abuse in the Parsons home, dating back to when Erica was only 2 years old. These allegations raised significant worries about how the family treated their adopted daughter. The Department of Social Services initiated an investigation into claims that Erica had been physically abused. Reports indicated that Casey Parsons often used a belt to discipline Erica, which resulted in visible bruises. Observers noted marks on Erica's buttocks, the back of her legs, and the side of her face. It was also reported that Erica sometimes refused to eat, and that Casey had told her she was not loved. During the interview with the Department of Social Services, Casey denied the claims of abuse. The investigator noticed that Erica seemed comfortable around her parents, sitting on their laps without any signs of fear. However, it was noted that Erica was quite small for her age, weighing only 41 pounds at 4 years old. To ensure Erica's safety, a safety plan was put in place. Casey and Sandy Parsons agreed to use non-physical methods of discipline, including timeouts and grounding, committed to providing a safe and stable home for Erica. On March 1, 2003, Casey went to Mexico for a medical procedure to reverse her tubal ligation. Later that year, in August, Erica started attending Boston Elementary School. The staff remembered her as a shy but kind girl who smiled frequently and had a fondness for stickers. One teacher noted that Erica would push her bangs out of her face when she felt nervous and would shine with pride when she received compliments. In January 2004, Casey announced online that she was pregnant, expecting a child in September. Around this time, the Department of Social Services received a complaint about the Parsons family, which prompted officials to visit their home. The complaint alleged that Erica was weak and that Casey no longer wanted her, asserting that the parents had attempted to give her away. Casey and Sandy denied using physical punishment, stating they raised their voices instead of hitting their children. They also explained that Erica suffered from gastrointestinal issues, causing her to vomit food she didn't like, and denied any threats to withhold food or give her away. When the Department of Social Services interviewed Erica in private, she described discipline as timeouts or loss of privileges and mentioned that she might get spanked for very serious misbehavior, although Erica seemed happy and well-connected with her adoptive parents. Investigators noted her small size and frailty. The Department of Social Services required the Parsons to seek medical care for Erica if her eating issues continued or if her development fell behind. Nonetheless, evidence of neglect was found, as Erica was not receiving necessary medical treatment. She was then placed with her aunt, who noticed that Erica was wearing toddler-sized clothes and was severely underweight. While living with her aunt, Erica began eating regularly, playing, and gaining weight. She also revealed that Casey and Sandy had physically disciplined her. However, the aunt did not pursue legal custody. After 8 months, Casey and Sandy regained custody of Erica. In 2004, Erica moved to a different elementary school. On August 20th of that year, Casey gave birth to a daughter. By 2005, Casey was pregnant again, but unfortunately experienced an early miscarriage. She then started a business. Some reports describe this business as a Chihuahua puppy mill, although specific details were limited. Later that year, Erica was homeschooled through a program created by Casey at their home. Casey was the chief administrator, and the state did not require background checks or detailed progress reports for the school. Records indicate that the program enrolled 3 girls and 1 boy, but there were no annual achievement test scores submitted from 2005 onwards. After this, information about Erica became difficult to find. On July 30th, 2013, Erica's 19-year-old brother, Jamie Parsons, argued with their parents and reported Erica missing. Jamie testified that the last time he saw Erica was on November 19th, 2011. She was standing in a corner, which was a common punishment Erica endured. She didn't look well. She looked like a zombie, he said. She said she didn't feel well. She said she couldn't breathe. Casey Parsons heard this and told her to shut up. When he woke up the next morning, his parents had left early, which was unusual, and Erica was gone. His parents returned home without Erica, and he sensed something was wrong. Jamie felt this explanation was strange, especially since his father, Sandy, appeared very upset when talking about Erica's absence. He recalled his father looking extremely pale and anxious. When he asked his parents where she was, they claimed they had taken her to Asheville, North Carolina, to stay with her biological grandmother, who supposedly reached out on Facebook to reconnect with her. Jamie told the authorities that this was the last he had heard about Erica. An investigation into Erica's disappearance began immediately. Detectives conducted a thorough search of the Parsons' home, lifting floorboards, examining the yard for possible hidden graves, and following every lead available. Despite their hard work, Erica's location remained unknown. They received countless tips and reports, including supposed sightings of her on the roadside and calls from psychics, but none provided any solid answers. The FBI got involved, offering rewards and drawing national attention to the case. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created an age progression photo to show what Erica might look like at 15 based on her appearance at age 9. These images were widely distributed on billboards in hopes of generating new information. Authorities were committed to finding Erica. Casey and Sandy told investigators that the last time they saw Erica was in December 2011 at a McDonald's in Mooresville, North Carolina. They claimed they took Erica to meet her biological grandmother, Irene Nan Goodman. Additionally, Casey and Sandy were unable to provide any contact information for Erica's grandmother, including the Facebook profile they said she used to communicate with them. The lead investigator put in a lot of effort to find Erica's grandmother and searched for people with her name in Asheville, but he found no evidence of anyone related to Erica. By August 2013, detectives publicly stated their belief that the story about Erica's grandmother was false. They also noted that Sandy and Casey were not cooperating with the investigation. Around the same time, Erica's biological mother, Carolyn Parsons, traveled to North Carolina to help the investigators. On August 21st, Casey and Sandy appeared on the Dr. Phil show, where they argued that Erica was not actually missing, but was a rebellious teenager who simply chose not to communicate with them. During the show, Casey mentioned that Erica's grandmother had told her that Erica refused to come home after staying with her for 2 months. Casey told Dr. Phil that Erica did not bring any of her personal belongings because when she went to stay with the Goodmans, they bought all new clothes for her to wear. When the Goodmans picked her up, a woman nicknamed Strawberry was also there and showed them a pile of clothes with tags in the back of their truck. The house where she was allegedly staying had a horse stable. The Parsons claimed that they also brought their other daughter, Brooke, along to bring Erica to Asheville. Brooke disputed this claim in her own interviews with the police, saying that she never rode a horse to Asheville to bring Erica to live there. Casey also claimed she attempted to contact Erica's grandmother, but the phone number was no longer in service, which she interpreted as Erica blocking their number. Although they appeared on national television, Casey and Sandy claimed they were good parents and insisted that Erica was safe. However, investigators were skeptical due to noticeable inconsistencies in their story. In September 2013, Casey opened her home to the media, showing Erica's old bedroom. But by then, public and official concern about Casey and Sandy's account was growing. The search for Erica continued as worries mounted about her well-being since her last confirmed sighting in 2011. Detectives on Erica Parsons' case had long suspected that Casey and Sandy were withholding important information. They believed that separating the couple might reveal the truth, as Casey seemed to dominate Sandy. However, it proved difficult to keep them apart until investigators discovered a significant error. The Parsons were still collecting adoption assistance and food stamps for Erica, even though she had not lived with them for 2 years. They received monthly checks of $634 in adoption assistance and continued to cash those checks after Erica was no longer living with them. They also continued to claim Erica on their tax returns. These federal benefits, meant for Erica's care, became crucial in involving the FBI. Casey pleaded guilty to 15 charges, while Sandy opted for trial. A jury found Sandy guilty on most charges in October 2014. The jury did not accept Sandy's claim that Casey had been in charge of the fraudulent activities and that he was unaware of their financial situation. At a sentencing hearing in federal court on February 18, 2015, Jamie Parsons and Robin Ashley testified about Erica's abuse by the Parsons family. Federal prosecutor Anand Ramaswamy stated that there was no record of Erica during the time her adoptive parents were receiving illegal money. Declare. The reason is that she is no longer alive. The hearing was continued until March 27th. Prosecutors also presented evidence of a series of scams allegedly perpetuated by Casey Parsons. In 2000, Casey was hired to be a surrogate mother. She became pregnant and took a payment of $10,000 for her services. Weeks later, she called the biological mother, Amy Miller, to say that she had miscarried. Miller says she believed Casey was still pregnant, as Casey refused to turn over medical records, changed her phone number, and sent her nasty emails. Casey then offered to sell the baby to her own sister, Robin, who in turn searched for Miller online to tell her Casey was indeed still pregnant and that Casey had taken money from 2 other couples who wanted to adopt the baby. Miller was able to take custody of her child at birth after getting law enforcement involved. Evidence was also presented of an eBay scam, where Casey accepted money for items listed on eBay but never sent the items. Judge Schroeder called Casey a serial swindler. On March 27, 2015, U.S. District Court Judge Thomas Schroeder sentenced Casey Parsons to 10 years in prison and Sandy to 8 years for fraud. Schroeder believes that Casey was the mastermind behind the events in question and stated that Erica suffered terrible abuse, noting that the fraud distracted investigators from other matters. The judge also mentioned that there was no evidence indicating that Erica was alive. In 2016, there was a significant breakthrough when Sandy, after more than 3 years of deception, confessed that Erica had died 5 years earlier at the age of 13. On September 29th, Sandy led investigators to Erica's remains. They were buried in a small grave near Sandy's mother's home on Blair Hendrick Road, between the towns of Pageland and Mount Croghan, South Carolina. Prior to the discovery, detectives recovered items during a search of a shed on Sandy's property, including a videotape, a hammer, teeth, and school records. There, Sandy quickly indicated the location of a shallow grave where he and Casey had buried Erica. Detectives noted that Sandy was somber and tearful during his confession. Sandy described the events leading up to Erica's death in December 2011. He was awakened by Casey, who informed him that Erica had died. Casey had placed Erica's body in a plastic tote, where it remained for 2 days while they figured out what to do. During this time, they continued with their lives and even attended a Christmas party. Eventually, they took Erica's remains to a site in Chesterfield County to bury her. To try to cover up any evidence, they poured bleach over her body. To avoid being tracked, they removed the batteries from their phones during their trips to the burial site, once to dig the grave and a second time to dispose of Erica's remains. After nearly 5 years of being hidden, Erica's body was finally found. Investigator Chad Moose led the effort to recover her remains, ensuring that she was treated with respect after her tragic life. To honor her, her remains were placed in a body bag that was left unzipped, allowing her to be at peace and no longer in darkness. Moose also added a stuffed animal to the bag while transporting her back to Rowan County. Finding Erica provided closure to a case that had troubled the community, and she was finally buried with the love and dignity she deserved. As one investigator noted, Erica received more love from the community than from her adoptive family. Investigators believed from the beginning that Casey Parsons was primarily responsible for what happened to Erica. They did not reveal the finding of Erica's remains in 2016, hoping that Casey would eventually confess. When faced with questions, Casey firmly denied any participation. She repeatedly claimed, "I've never been there," rejecting all allegations of abuse or misconduct. However, the evidence in the form of Erica's remains revealed a chilling account of ongoing and severe abuse. On October 14, 2016, Erica's remains were sent to the medical examiner, who took 3 months to carefully examine her skeleton. The results were heartbreaking. Erica had suffered severe and ongoing abuse, with injuries all over her body affecting her face, torso, back, and limbs. She had multiple fractures, including broken bones in her shoulder blades and ribs that had partially healed before being broken again. Some of the injuries showed signs of long-term trauma, with new bone growth trying to heal the damage. It was evident that Erica had faced continuous physical violence. Her brother, Jamie Parsons, confirmed the extent of the abuse in interviews. He described how Erica was regularly beaten, often with belts or remote controls, and mentioned friendly reminders, a cruel term used by Casey for bending Erica's fingers back until they almost touched her wrist. Erica experienced more than just physical violence. She was also starved for long periods, severely affecting her growth. By the time she was 13, her bones resembled those of a typical 9-year-old. This combination of abuse and neglect was considered torture, marking an extreme level of cruelty rarely seen in cases of child abuse. Family photos highlighted Erica's suffering as well. While her siblings looked happy and carefree in their pictures, Erica was often shown standing alone, facing a corner. These images powerfully illustrated her isolation and the neglect she faced, making the contrast between her siblings' joy and her own mistreatment deeply tragic. On June 18, 2017, Erica was finally laid to rest in a funeral organized and funded by the Rowan County community. Hundreds of people attended, wanting to show Erica the love and respect she never received during her life. On February 19, 2018, a grand jury indicted both Sandy and Casey Parsons on counts of first-degree murder, felony child abuse, inflicting serious injury, felony concealment of death, and felony obstruction of justice. Casey Parsons was brought to Rowan County for a court appearance on March 14, 2018, while Sandy Parsons was brought back for a court hearing on March 15. Prosecutors announced in April 2018 that they were seeking the death penalty for both Casey and Sandy Parsons. As of February 2019, defense attorneys agreed to separate trials. Casey Parsons pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on August 2, 2019 in Rowan County Superior Court and was sentenced to life without parole. The trial date for Sandy Parsons was set for April 6, 2020, and his attorney requested a change of venue. Sandy Parsons pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, child abuse, concealment of death, and obstruction on December 17, 2019, and was sentenced to at least 33 years to be served after his federal sentence. On January 14, 2022, according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons website, Sandy Parsons was released from federal custody after completing his sentence for tax and mail fraud in connection with benefits received on behalf of Erica. That same day, he began serving a state sentence in Central Prison. Federal Bureau of Prisons records show Casey Parsons was released from federal custody November 25, 2023, to begin serving her state sentence. At that time, her husband was listed as a prisoner at Alexander Correctional Institution. The motivations of the Parsons are still not fully understood, but their actions indicate a profound level of cruelty and neglect. Erica was treated inhumanely, enduring unimaginable suffering from those who were supposed to care for her. As her community honors her memory and strives for justice, there is hope that policies and systems will be improved to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Erica, now at peace, will always be remembered. In some countries, strict control is a deeply ingrained part of the culture and customs. This can conflict with the values commonly held in Western societies. Even after moving to a new country, some people find it hard to adjust to greater personal freedoms. Holding too tightly to these traditional beliefs can sometimes lead to serious problems. Aziz Yazdanpana was born in Iran on May 29, 1955. Even as a young man, he was known for being strict and tough, yet those close to him also saw his softer side. His stern father instilled in him a deep respect for family, a sense of duty, and a strong sense of responsibility, values that Aziz strived to uphold. He was devoted to his family and longed to have one of his own. In his youth in Iran, he met the love of his life, Nasrin Rahmati, who was born on February 4, 1956. After dating for a while, they married, marking a new chapter in both their lives. Together, they decided to make a radical change and start anew in the United States of America. They successfully immigrated and settled in Grapevine, Texas, a small, pleasant town. Later, Nasrin's sister and her husband joined them in the U.S. There, the family continued to build their lives, raising 2 children. At the time of the events in question, their daughter, Nona Yazdanpana, was 19, and their son, Ali Yazdanpana, was 14. Upon arriving in the U.S., Nasrin became a homemaker, dedicating her time to raising their children and managing the household. This was the traditional family structure common in Iran. Aziz was the breadwinner, focusing on a career in real estate. Initially, they had enough money, but with the addition of new family members, their circumstances changed, and they had to become more frugal. Although Aziz didn't outwardly appear strict and authoritarian, this became apparent to those who knew them well. This dynamic reflected the cultural influence of their upbringing. To the outside world, they seemed like a typical family pursuing the American dream. However, Nasrin couldn't help but notice the greater freedoms afforded to women in America compared to Iran. She desired more independence, but Aziz staunchly opposed it, clinging to traditional gender roles. Beneath the facade of an ideal family, problems began to mount. Soon, Aziz faced a series of setbacks. They had purchased a large family home, and as the children grew, their expenses increased. Furthermore, Aziz's ambitions exceeded their financial means, and he struggled to achieve the level of income he desired. Nasrin offered support, but Aziz grew increasingly discontented. A significant blow came in 1996 when Aziz was convicted of tax evasion and ordered to pay a $30,000 fine. He was also placed on probation for 3 years, further straining the family's already limited resources and threatening the loss of their home. Nasrin wanted to contribute to managing the budget and suggested solutions, such as downsizing to a more affordable house. However, Aziz refused to allow her to make important decisions, seemingly acting in opposition to her suggestions. He believed he could resolve their financial problems on his own and elevate their situation. Nasrin attempted to become more involved in the family's life, including financial matters, and suggested ways she could help, pointing to the common practice of American women earning incomes on par with their husbands. However, Aziz considered even the suggestion an insult. He insisted that his wife remain a housewife, responsible only for the children and household chores. This situation persisted for several years. By 1999, their financial situation had reached another low point, leading them to consider filing for bankruptcy. However, the case was quickly dismissed. As the children grew up, their needs increased, requiring new clothes and school supplies. Aziz began to accuse Nasrin and the children of overspending. Despite their modest lifestyle, his attempts to improve their financial situation continued to fail. The situation worsened in 2007 when Aziz lost his job, depriving the family of their only source of income. Despite everything, Aziz continued to insist that Nasrin not work. However, she could no longer remain idle. She had taken courses and obtained a cosmetology license and wanted to work in a beauty salon, perhaps even starting her own business. This would significantly contribute to the family's budget. Aziz ignored her pleas, clinging to his conservative beliefs. He had never adapted to the American way of life, where women could hold equal positions with men, and refused to consider deviating from his traditional views. Finally, when her husband lost his job and could not find another, Nasrin decided to take matters into her own hands. Disobeying her husband was out of character, but she saw no other way to save her family from financial ruin. She was completely disappointed in him and realized he had no chance of fitting into the American format. Ignoring his prohibitions, Nasrin found a job, managing to work at 2 beauty salons simultaneously. This initially allowed her to somewhat stabilize the situation, but Aziz was going through a terrible emotional period and made rash decisions. He felt he had lost his manhood, not only because he lost his job, but also because he could not support his family. He became jealous of Nasrin's success and, in an attempt to assert his dominance, declared he would refuse to work at all if she continued to work like a man. He repeatedly confessed to family friends that all this had severely damaged his self-esteem. The roles in the family had now completely reversed. Nasrin began working with enthusiasm, hoping her husband's resentment would soon pass and they could build a prosperous future together. But instead of actively seeking income, Aziz ignored the needs of his loved ones. He simply stopped showing any initiative and didn't even look for work. Aziz didn't give up easily, but his pride was deeply wounded by his wife's actions. According to a friend of Nasrin, the tension in the marriage had increased significantly. The owner of the beauty salon where Nasrin worked saw her hard work and the problems the family was struggling with. Even with the strained relationship with her husband, Nasrin still hoped they could save their marriage and overcome their financial difficulties. She often spoke of her dreams in which Aziz would find a job and stop being angry with her. However, friends and neighbors noticed that the atmosphere in the house was becoming increasingly tense. Aziz's attempt to teach her a lesson had backfired. To his surprise, his wife was able to bear the financial burden, providing for him and their 2 children. It was difficult, but she managed. Instead of being happy for her, he harbored resentment and anger, which manifested in cruel ways. She maintained stability for a while. However, once the children grew up, their needs increased again, and their daughter needed money for her education, putting a strain on their finances. Aziz continued to mock her. He was so determined to teach his wife a lesson that he didn't understand the consequences of his actions. Even the children began to get angry with him. Nona and Ali were old enough to see and understand what was happening. However, his strict control did not weaken, so they did not have much freedom. Conflicts in the family home became regular. If earlier, Aziz had provoked them by blaming everyone for their failures, now the others confronted him directly. After 24 years of marriage, Nasrin stopped trying to encourage Aziz. She finally realized that he was not going to participate in solving their problems, but would continue to make them worse. By April 2011, Nasrin had decided to separate from Aziz. She and her children left their spacious family home, choosing a more modest living arrangement to avoid complete financial ruin. They moved from a 2-story house of 280 square meters to a 3-room apartment, providing minimal amenities for their son and daughter. The priority was not comfort or size, but freedom from her husband, who was a burden, and increased tension within the family. They ended up about 3 kilometers from their old residence. Nasrin took out a mortgage on the apartment and planned to continue paying for it herself. Remarkably, even in this situation, she didn't want to cause a scene and simply moved quietly, without unnecessary conflict. Even the neighbors didn't immediately realize what had happened, as it was all done so calmly. They were more struck by the sudden silence, the absence of arguments in the house. Only then did some realize Nasrin and Aziz had separated. Only the closest neighbors knew the truth. Several months passed. Nasrin continued to work and felt a significant sense of relief after leaving her husband. The atmosphere in the family became much calmer and warmer. Despite financial constraints, the burden felt much lighter than when she was living with Aziz. Nasrin spent a lot of time with her family and friends. In her opinion, reconciliation with her husband was completely out of the question. From the outside, Aziz's condition seemed to have improved, but it was just an act. One Friday in March, they were seen together again. This happened a few months after the breakup. That day, Aziz and Nasrin participated in a joint garage sale, but they didn't seem as friendly and happy as before. Many noticed the tension, but Aziz avoided conflict. He tried to appear to be a good person, even attending his children's sports competition. However, Nasrin understood perfectly well that this was just a facade. She had already filed for divorce and was waiting for it to be finalized. Everyone thought that the separation was beneficial for Nasrin. Nasrin continued to work hard, and her daughter, Nona, contributed to the family income. Without her father's oppressive presence, Nona was able to help realize their dream of simplifying their life in the US. Just like her mother, the family began to cope much better. Nona earned her high school diploma and then went to college. With the improved atmosphere at home, she could focus on more than just solving problems. She began to pursue her own ambitions. She wanted to go to the University of California to study law. If she could become a lawyer and start a private practice, it could be the beginning of a better life for her. However, not everyone was so optimistic about the future. Close friends knew that Nona was actually going through a difficult time. Behind the facade of progress and apparent resilience, there was a deep inner struggle. Back in August 2011, she confessed to her best friends that she was dealing with some serious issues that were only getting worse. However, no one could get her to reveal any details. For Aziz, the situation continued to deteriorate. He tried in every way to demonstrate that he was ready to continue the relationship, but Nasrin and the children were indifferent. During their separation, Nasrin only became more convinced that she was moving in the right direction and that life would be easier, more comfortable, alone. All this fueled Aziz's anger. He was still trying to repair the relationship, but deep down, he had long understood that it was impossible. Each meeting with Nasreen, where she shared her successes, only increased his resentment. All this anger accumulated, and it was bound to explode eventually. After a year of shocks, separations, and conflicts, on December 25, 2011, Nasreen decided to throw a festive Christmas party at her house, intended to gather all family members and mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Everyone who knew Nasreen and the children well was invited, except for Aziz. No one wanted him to come and ruin the mood. As he usually did, Nasreen wanted to celebrate with her children, so she invited her sister, Zohra Rahmati, 58, her husband, Mohammad Hossein Zari, 59, and their daughter, Sahra Zari, 22. Unfortunately, Aziz learned about the planned Christmas party. He was furious that he wasn't invited. Despite all the pain and insults he had inflicted on his family, he believed he had a right to attend the event, and he harbored malicious intentions. At the very beginning of the holiday, around 11 a.m., there was a knock at Nasreen's door. When she opened it, she saw a man dressed as Santa Claus. Nasreen immediately recognized him as Aziz. Obviously, no one had invited him. He could ruin the family holiday, and she desperately wanted to prevent that. Aziz behaved very friendly, trying to convince her that he only wanted to surprise the children. After a short discussion, Nasreen reluctantly agreed to let him in. As soon as Aziz entered, the atmosphere became tense. Everyone, even Sarah, felt the unease. No one wanted him there. They hoped he would leave soon after offering his greetings. Sarah was texting her friends. Around 11 a.m., she wrote that Uncle Aziz showed up at a party he wasn't invited to, dressed as Santa Claus, to ruin everything. She sarcastically added that Aziz now wanted to win the Father of the Year award. The text was full of biting remarks, as she knew how much the man had damaged the lives of her aunt and aunt's children. At 11:15, Sahra sent another message. According to her, Aziz had already started to provoke another argument. Then, the girl fell silent forever. At 11:34, a call came into the 911 emergency service. The operator could barely hear a whisper on the other end of the line. The caller was begging for rescue. After a few short phrases, the call was disconnected. No information was provided, but it was clear that something terrible had happened. The operator quickly identified the location from which the call was made, and a police patrol was dispatched to the address to investigate. The officers arrived within 3 minutes, but no one answered the door. Given the alarming circumstances of the call, they decided to force entry. Inside, the officers found a horrifying scene: a festive table laden with food and drink, unopened gifts, and the bodies of 7 people. None had survived. The victims were identified as 55-year-old Nasreen, 56-year-old Aziz, their children, 19-year-old Nona, and 14-year-old Ali. Nasreen's sister, 58-year-old Zohra, her husband, 59-year-old Muhammad, and their daughter, 22-year-old Sarah. The entire family, along with their guests, had been shot. The television was on, and one of the victims was still dressed in pajamas. The children and teenagers had been shot in the head. Muhammad had sustained the most gunshot wounds, including shots to the head, chest, and stomach, suggesting he had tried to escape. Nasreen and Aziz were both shot in the head. The victims' autopsies revealed that everyone except Muhammad had been shot with the same 9mm weapon. Muhammad was found with a 9mm firearm in his hand. A second man, dressed as Santa Claus, Aziz, was also found with a firearm in hand. It remained unclear whether he was the attacker or if he had been trying to defend himself. Aziz and Muhammad were initially considered suspects. To clarify the situation, detectives began tracing the firearms. All evidence was collected and sent for ballistic analysis. The public was shocked by the murders and demanded quick answers from the police. Detectives initially believed that the attacker was among the dead and no longer posed a threat. The first major breakthrough came the day after the tragedy, on December 26, 2011. The 9mm pistol was traced back to a 1996 purchase registered to Aziz, Ballistic analysis confirmed that it was used to kill 5 of the victims. Significant gunpowder residue was found on Aziz's hands, indicating he had fired the weapon extensively. Minimal gunpowder residue was found on Mohammed's hands, suggesting he had not fired a weapon actively. Experts suggested he may have only fired once. The investigation was further aided by interviews with neighbors and a review of surveillance footage in the area. The footage showed that after the man dressed as Santa Claus entered the house, no one left. It appeared that Aziz had tried to cover his tracks. After shooting his relatives, he attempted to frame Mohammed by placing the 9mm pistol in his hand after his death. The weapon had been carefully cleaned and all fingerprints removed. There wasn't even a trace of Mohammed's fingerprints on the gun, which was impossible. Aziz fired 2 shots from a .40 caliber pistol. The first struck Mohammed, and the second he directed into his own head. Long, standing animosity between the family members, coupled with the news that Aziz was unwelcome at the gathering, may have been the final catalyst for his actions. However, the fact that he deliberately came to the house armed suggests that he had planned the crime in advance. This wasn't an act of spontaneous aggression, but seemingly a premeditated, first-degree murder of his entire family. Aziz took great pains to establish a reliable alibi, a fact that initially confused the investigation. Yet, for reasons unknown, he changed his mind and chose to end his life alongside his loved ones. He likely realized the magnitude of his crime and felt he could not live with the consequences. In total, 7 people died in this bloody tragedy. The scale of the devastation shocked not only those familiar with the Aziz family, but the entire local community. Another important piece of evidence is mobile phone data of Sarah. Detectives became interested in messages she had sent to her friends. Only 20 minutes elapsed between the start of the attack and the deaths of 7 people. The exact trigger that prompted Aziz to commit such violence remained unclear. During the investigation, various theories emerged, ranging from the obvious anger Aziz felt towards his wife and family to his potential mental state. Many experts in the field of psychiatry weighed in on the issue. Aziz appeared to be a man sinking into a deep depression, feeling that he was losing control of his life. His wife had filed for divorce a few months before the massacre, and his house was in a deplorable state. He faced foreclosure and had not secured stable, full-time employment leading up to the crime. While law enforcement officers struggled to piece together the puzzle, they uncovered the struggles of 19-year-old Nona. She had begun dating a friend and classmate, a relationship her father disapproved of. A conservative man deeply rooted in the traditions of his native country, Aziz exerted total control over the lives of all his family members, including his daughter, often to the detriment of her emotional well-being. Nona's friends reported that she often came to school in tears, complaining that her father wouldn't allow her to wear the clothes she liked and regularly confiscated and checked her mobile phone, scrutinizing every message. According to his religious and cultural views, she was not allowed to leave the house until a certain age. Even after Nona reached that age, Aziz forbade her from communicating with anyone, especially boys and men. Nona's disobedience only worsened Aziz's state of mind. When the family still lived together in their old house, he installed surveillance cameras throughout the property, both inside and out. This allowed him to monitor everyone's movements, creating a situation resembling a developing obsession. He jealously guarded her, even sealing the window in her room to prevent her from secretly running away to see her girlfriend. Aziz frantically tried to maintain control, a control he had long since lost. When the disobedience reached a breaking point, everyone abandoned him. The head of the broken family simply decided to kill everyone. Further details of Aziz's relationships were revealed. He had been quite close to his brother-in-law, Mohammed. For a long time, the men shared a warm relationship and even went on trips together. On one occasion, they cheated on their wives, renting hotel rooms and spending the night with escorts. After Nasreen filed for divorce, Aziz blamed everyone but himself, unable to accept his own imperfections. The killer became convinced that Muhammad had revealed his infidelity, poisoning Nasrin against him. From that moment on, the relationship between the men deteriorated significantly, and Aziz considered his brother-in-law a traitor. This explained why Aziz had decided to frame him by placing a weapon in the dead man's hand. Those who knew Nasrin well had heard much about her reasons for separating from Aziz. She cited his failures in upholding his cultural and religious obligations, instead of providing for everyone, supporting his family, and creating a comfortable home. Aziz seemed to deliberately make their lives difficult, increasing the emotional distance between himself and his wife and children. He transformed their life and everyday existence into a nightmare, pushing them to the verge of complete ruin. Instead of accepting responsibility for his actions, Aziz tried to blame everyone around him. As it turned out, Nasrin's close friends had heard many times that she was afraid of her husband. She had stated this several months before filing for divorce, and after she moved out, the situation only worsened. She tried to avoid contact with him and did not allow him into the house. She prevented him from communicating with the children. Considering him dangerous, she ignored suggestions to report him to the police, hoping he would calm down on his own and not wanting to cause him further trouble. Neighbors had heard that Aziz had been carrying a gun for a long time. He completely ignored the traditions and laws of the country he had moved to. He claimed that he had acquired a firearm to protect his daughter from the unwanted attention of American men. On December 28, 2011, the entire Grapevine, Texas community gathered to honor the victims. This shooting is the deadliest crime ever committed in the city. Nasrin and the children were especially mourned. She was remembered as a devoted mother, an altruistic, generous woman who tried to escape the clutches of a tyrant, but paid for it with her life. The Christmas Day massacre of 2011 left Grapevine, Texas, forever scarred, its festive spirit tainted by an unimaginable act of violence. The loss of Nasrin Rahmati, her children, Nona and Ali, and their relatives Zohre Rahmati, Muhammad Hossein Zari, and Sahra Zari shattered a close-knit community known as the Christmas capital of Texas. Vigils at Parr Park and memorials at Colleyville Heritage High School honored their memory. The tragedy underscored the devastating consequences of unaddressed marital strife, financial ruin, and rigid cultural beliefs clashing with personal freedoms. It serves as a somber reminder to foster understanding and support for those struggling to adapt to new societal norms, lest such pain and loss repeat in silence. Samantha Vernagallo and Drew Garnier first crossed paths as young adults on Long Island, New York, where they both grew up. While the specifics of their first meeting remain private, it's clear that their connection blossomed during their early 20s. Samantha, who lives in Center Reach, is a former student of Center Reach High School. She is well liked for her warm, caring personality and her dream of raising a happy family. Drew, from nearby Lake Grove, shared her aspirations for a traditional family life. Over time, their bond deepened as they discovered they both envisioned the same future: marriage, children, and building a meaningful life together. Samantha appreciates Drew's stability and commitment to creating a safe living environment. Those who know them see them as a loving couple, working toward a common goal of a happy future. Thanks to the support from their family, both Samantha and Drew grew up mature and did not face any serious issues. Neither had a troubling past, no criminal records, substance abuse, or significant mental health concerns. Drew held steady employment and showed dedication to supporting his growing family, while Samantha was known for her beauty, compassion, and devotion to her loved ones. After several years together, they married and had 2 daughters, Adelina, followed by Izzy. 3 years later, Samantha embraced motherhood wholeheartedly, always putting her daughters first and ensuring they felt safe and loved. As the family grew, they began to feel the financial pressures of living on Long Island, dreaming of a quieter, more affordable life where their daughters could thrive. Samantha and Drew decided to leave Long Island and relocate to Masonville, a small town in Delaware County, New York. Situated in the scenic Catskills region, about 150 miles northwest of New York City, Masonville offered the simpler lifestyle they desired: lower living costs, a close-knit community, and a peaceful environment where children could safely play and grow. The family settled into a mobile home on Hook Road, a quiet area where neighbors knew one another and a sense of community prevailed. For Samantha and Drew, the move symbolized a fresh start. Samantha envisioned an idyllic childhood for her daughters, filled with natural beauty, fresh air, and the security of a supportive community. She remained fully committed to her family, caring deeply for her 9-year-old daughter Adelina and 6-year-old Izzy. Drew quickly adapted to the new lifestyle as well, finding work and showing dedication to his family. From the outside, Drew and Samantha Garnier appeared to have a strong marriage and a happy family life. Their life in Masonville seemed stable and focused on building a better future for their 2 daughters. Their joy grew even more when Samantha found out she was pregnant with their 3rd child. By September 2024, she was 5 months along and had learned they were expecting another daughter. For Samantha, this news brought immense happiness. She cherished being a mother and was excited about welcoming another little girl. However, those close to the family noticed that Drew's reaction to the news was quite different. While Samantha celebrated the idea of another daughter, Drew had been hoping for a son. Family members later revealed that Drew's desire for a boy had intensified with each pregnancy. Hearing they would have a 3rd daughter deeply disappointed him and seemed to affect him in ways that no one could have foreseen. Despite this hidden tension, there were no visible signs that Drew was capable of violence. He had no criminal record, history of domestic abuse, or encounters with law enforcement. To their neighbors, their family was an ordinary family, adapting to life in a small town. Samantha, although noticing subtle changes in Drew's behavior, remained focused on her family and the upcoming birth of their 3rd daughter in February 2025. She also looked forward to celebrating her 30th birthday, just 2 weeks away. Life in their family household carried on as usual during late summer and early fall of 2024. Adelina and Izzy, the daughters, went to school each day. Samantha managed the house while preparing for the new baby, and Drew went to work. Anyone observing the family would have seen a picture of normalcy, but underneath, Drew's disappointment about the baby's gender was quietly festering. With no outward signs of trouble, no calls to the police or family interventions, no one could have predicted the tragedy that was about to unfold. Those who later tried to understand Drew's actions were baffled. On the surface, he seemed to have everything: a loving wife, 2 healthy daughters, steady employment, and another child on the way. Samantha had built a life filled with love and stability for their family, but for reasons no one could fathom, the good things in Drew's life became a source of anger. On the night of Wednesday, September 4th, 2024, just days after Labor Day, their household appeared to be winding down from a normal day. Adelina and Izzy were likely getting ready for bed, and Samantha, 5 months pregnant, was caring for her daughters and preparing for the evening. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but beneath the surface, Drew's frustrations had reached their breaking point. At around 11:29 p.m., the quiet town of Masonville was jolted by an emergency that shocked the entire community. Drew called 911 to report what he described as a domestic dispute at their family home. To the dispatcher, Drew sounded like a man trying to help his wife. He claimed Samantha had been injured and that he was applying pressure to her wounds to stop the bleeding. However, when police arrived at the scene, they discovered a horrifying scene that was completely opposite to what Drew described, permanently shattering the image of a peaceful family. New York State Police troopers Corey King and Ronald King were dispatched to respond to an emergency call. When the troopers arrived at the mobile home with its covered porch, they were prepared to assist what they believed was an injured woman. Instead, they were confronted with an unthinkable scene. As they approached, Drew briefly stuck his head out the front door before quickly retreating inside. His suspicious behavior immediately alerted the troopers that something was wrong. Shortly after, a single gunshot echoed from inside the house, sending shockwaves through the officers. They quickly retreated to the end of the driveway and called for backup from a Delaware County Sheriff's deputy, using the deputy's patrol car as cover. The officers cautiously approached the house again. Suddenly, Adelina, a 9-year-old girl, emerged from the home, running toward the police with her clothes soaked in blood. The officers' hearts sank as they realized this child had witnessed unimaginable violence. Through tears, Adelina told the officers that her mother had been stabbed and that her father, Drew, was still inside the house with a gun. As they worked to protect Adelina, her 6-year-old sibling, Izzy, also ran out, similarly covered in blood. Both sisters were deeply affected by the horrific events that had just occurred. Despite being injured and in shock, they still tried to talk to the police. The officers provided first aid to the children and called for additional medical assistance. It was clear that both girls had endured a horrific ordeal. Once they were safely transported to receive medical care, the focus turned back to Drew inside the house. The officers called out for him to surrender, and to their surprise, he walked out of the home with his hands raised. Drew was immediately arrested without resistance. The officers noted he was covered in blood and had cuts on his hands. During his arrest, police found a butter knife in his pocket, a chilling piece of evidence that would later shed light on the brutal events of that night. Inside the house, the officers found Samantha lying on her side, critically injured with multiple stab wounds. Despite their efforts to provide life-saving aid, it was clear her injuries were severe. Emergency medical personnel arrived, and Samantha was airlifted to Wilson Medical Center in Johnson City. Both daughters, Izzy and Adelina, were flown to Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse as well, due to the severity of their injuries. Investigators later determined that all 3 victims had been subjected to a prolonged and brutal attack. Tragically, Samantha succumbed to her injuries and was pronounced dead at the hospital. She was only 29 years old and just 2 weeks away from her 30th birthday. Her unborn daughter, whom she had been 5 months pregnant with, also did not survive. Adelina and Izzy remained hospitalized in serious condition but were expected to recover physically. However, the emotional trauma they endured would require extensive therapy and support for years. Drew was transported to A.O. Fox Hospital for treatment of superficial self-inflicted wounds. After receiving care, he was processed at the New York State Police Barracks in Sydney. He was charged and faced full legal accountability for the horrific attack. The investigation that followed was detailed and exhaustive, led by New York State Police, with support from the Delaware County Sheriff's Office and local law enforcement agencies. Major Lucas Shooter, commander of Troop C, held a press conference on September 6, 2024, to provide new information regarding the arrest and charges in the case. What made this case particularly unsettling for investigators was that it marked the first time the state police had been called to Samantha and Drew's residence for a domestic issue. There were no prior reports, no history of domestic violence, and no indication that Drew was capable of such violence toward his own family. As the investigation progressed, police discovered additional alarming evidence. A search of the property revealed that Drew owned multiple firearms and 2 high-capacity ammunition-feeding devices. These findings led to weapons-related charges being added to the list of crimes he faced. On September 5, 2024, Drew Garnier was officially charged with second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder. He was arraigned at Delhi Town Court and sent to the Delaware County Jail without bail. Recognizing the gravity of the case, Delaware County District Attorney Shah Smith quickly convened an emergency grand jury session. On September 11, 2024, the grand jury issued an 8-count indictment against Drew. In addition to the original charges, the indictment included weapons violations, second-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, criminal use of a firearm, and multiple counts of illegal weapon possession. Drew pleaded not guilty to all charges at his arraignment before Delaware County Court. Judge John L. Hubbard, who ordered him to remain in the custody of the Delaware County Sheriff's Office without bail. If convicted on all charges, Drew faced a potential sentence of 25 years to life in prison. However, as the case advanced, it became evident that going to trial would force his daughters, Adelina and Izzy, to relive the trauma of that horrific night by testifying. To prevent further emotional harm to the girls, prosecutors opted for a negotiated plea deal. On March 25, 2025, Drew pleaded guilty to reduced charges of first-degree manslaughter and 2 counts of first-degree assault in exchange for a total sentence of 30 years in state prison, followed by 15 years of post-release supervision. District Attorney Smith explained that, although the sentence was lower than the maximum possible sentence, the agreement was in the best interests of Izzy and Adelina. The sentencing hearing took place on May 13, 2025, in Delaware County Court. The courtroom was filled with family members, community members, and court officials. During the hearing, only one victim impact statement was read, that of Samantha's father, Gregory Vernagallo. He provided critical insight into what had driven the crime. Gregory informed the court that Drew had wanted a boy and became furious when he found out Samantha was pregnant with their 3rd daughter. He explained that this shocking revelation, that gender disappointment had motivated such horrific violence, had added a deeply disturbing dimension to an already tragic case. He also shared that he had adopted his 2 granddaughters and devoted his life to raising them, stating that he was their father now and would protect them. He added that he hadn't left their sides since the attack. When given the chance to speak, Drew addressed the court with apparent remorse and expressed his regret to his in-laws, especially his children. He also expressed hope that someday he could make amends with his kids. He said he would not force anything on them and respected their decisions, but added that if they ever wanted to see him, he hoped he would be allowed to be there for them. Public defender Joseph Hermedi emphasized the lack of logic behind the crime, stating that his client, Drew, had no explanation for what had happened. Joseph described the situation as extremely tragic and mentioned that he didn't believe anyone would disagree with that assessment. Judge John L. Hubbard considered Drew's clean record before sentencing him. The judge said Drew had taken the life of his wife and harmed his children, who were entitled to his protection, and sentenced him to 30 years in prison. During the hearing, Drew asked for permission to continue contact with his daughters, Izzy and Adelina, while incarcerated. Delaware County District Attorney Shah Smith strongly opposed the request, urging the court to impose the longest possible no-contact orders. Judge John agreed and issued stay-away orders for both Izzy and Adelina until 2056, which is 8 years beyond Drew's maximum potential release date. The judge added that if the daughters ever wished to contact their father, they could petition the court to revise the protective orders. Drew refused to sign the court orders, but they were served to him in court regardless. His refusal was seen as further resistance to accepting responsibility for his actions against his children. This heartbreaking case has had devastating consequences for all involved. Samantha and Drew's 2 daughters, Adelina and Izzy, are now orphans because of their father's actions. The girls are now legally adopted by their grandfather Gregory and have moved to a new home to settle down and receive better care. A GoFundMe campaign organized by Aaron Leahy from Center raised over $16,000 to support Izzy and Adelina. The campaign described Samantha, the girl's mother, as compassionate and loving. It revealed that Samantha was pregnant with a baby girl due in February 2025 and was just weeks away from celebrating her 30th birthday when her life was tragically cut short. The crime shocked the residents of Masonville, a small, peaceful community where such acts of violence are extremely rare. District Attorney Sean Smith commended law enforcement for their diligent investigation and dedication. He mentioned that what made the case especially chilling was the lack of any warning signs that could have foreshadowed such violence. Drew Garnier had no prior criminal record, mental health issues, or prior interactions with law enforcement. The revelation that gender disappointment over an unborn child could escalate to the murder of a pregnant wife and an attack on his daughters serves as a sobering reminder of how domestic violence can erupt without any prior indications. It was March the 25th, 2022 in Mayfield, a quiet suburb of Newcastle, Australia. 21-year-old Mackenzie Anderson, known as Max to her friends, was at home in her modest apartment on Crebot Street. She was a young mother, her life revolving around her 23-month-old son. Around 10:40 p.m., a frantic call reached the local police. A neighbor, startled by screams, reported a disturbance at Mackenzie's apartment. The police rushed to the scene. When they arrived at the Mayfield Street apartment, they found a horrific scene. Mackenzie was born and raised in Newcastle, New South Wales, in a close-knit family. Her mother, Tabitha Ackret, a dental hygienist, was a pillar of support. Their bond was evident in the heartfelt tributes Tabitha later shared. Mackenzie was also close to her stepfather and friends, who described her as the heart of their circle. She had a knack for making people laugh, often sharing snippets of her life on social media, where her TikTok videos captured her humor and strength as a young mother. Her son was her world, and she poured her energy into creating a stable life for him despite the hardships she faced. Mackenzie's life hadn't been easy. By her early 20s, she was navigating the challenges of single motherhood while living in a modest unit on Crebot Street. Friends said she was determined to break free from a cycle of hardship, working to provide for her son and dreaming of a brighter future. Her relationship with Tyrone Thompson, her ex-partner, cast a long shadow over her life. The two began dating in late 2019, and their on-again relationship was marked by turbulence. By October 2021, Thompson had been jailed for assaulting Mackenzie, intimidating her, and damaging her property. An apprehended violence order was in place, meant to keep Thompson away from Mackenzie, prohibiting any contact or visits to her home. He served a short sentence with a non-parole period of just over 4 months and was released on March 9, 2022. Mackenzie's friends later revealed Mackenzie lived in constant fear, convinced Thompson would come after her once he was free. Then, she messaged a friend, saying that Tyrone had just gotten out of jail and was still being weird, harassing her. Despite the AVO, Thompson reached out to Mackenzie almost immediately after his release, calling her and sending messages from multiple social media accounts. One heartbreaking detail emerged later. Mackenzie had ordered for a new set of knives for Christmas 2021, a practical gift for her home. Those same knives would later become part of the tragedy. The night of March 25, 2022, started like any other in the quiet suburb of Mayfield, but beneath the surface of this ordinary night, a tragedy was unfolding. Mackenzie's apartment on Mayfield was a small, unassuming unit in a block of flats, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by sight, even by name. That evening, she wasn't alone. A male friend, whose identity was closely guarded in early reports, was with her, along with her 23-month-old son, who was likely asleep in his crib. Tyrone Thompson, her ex-partner, was also present at some point during the night, despite the apprehended violence order that barred him from contacting her or visiting her home. The details of how Thompson ended up at her apartment remain murky, but court records later revealed that he had been asked to leave multiple times that evening. His refusal to comply set the stage for what would become a devastating confrontation. In panic, a neighbor dialed emergency services, describing a scene that sounded dire: a woman's voice in distress, a man's voice shouting, and the unmistakable sense that something was terribly wrong. The urgency was clear enough to prompt an immediate response from the Newcastle City Police District. When police arrived at the apartment block, they were met with a harrowing sight. Mackenzie lay lifeless on the veranda outside her unit, her body surrounded by blood. The scene was chaotic, with paramedics soon joining the officers in a frantic attempt to save her. Despite their best efforts, Mackenzie was pronounced dead at the scene. Her injuries were too severe to overcome. Her toddler son, found inside the apartment, was mercifully unharmed. Police found a man at the scene, later identified as Tyrone Thompson, sitting cross-legged at the top of the communal stairs, his hand bloodied and injured. He was loud and demanding medical attention for his wound. A broken knife handle and blade were found near Mackenzie, stark evidence of the brutality that had unfolded. Thompson was arrested and taken to hospital under police guard for treatment of his injury. The tragedy was the culmination of events that had been building for weeks. After his release from prison on March 9, 2022, Thompson immediately breached the apprehended violence order. He began contacting Mackenzie, calling her, messaging her from multiple social media accounts, and even reaching out to people close to her new partner. Court documents later revealed that Mackenzie had spent much of the previous 6 days with Thompson. Despite her fear of him, friends said she felt trapped, unsure how to break free from his persistent attempts to reconnect. That night, Thompson and a male friend were among those gathered at her apartment. Though the exact dynamics remain unclear, tensions escalated. The male friend, who had left earlier in the evening, returned to check on her, only to witness a horrific scene. Thompson standing over Mackenzie, who was already on the ground. Investigators later learned that Mackenzie had been trying to protect herself in the days leading up to that night. She had reached out to domestic violence advocacy groups, emailing them to request help with security measures like cameras and reinforced doors. The night of March 25th wasn't a sudden explosion of violence, but the culmination of a pattern of control and intimidation. Yet, the system allowed him back into her life just 16 days before her death. The AVO, meant to be her shield, was little more than a piece of paper. The Newcastle City Police District launched a meticulous investigation to uncover what had happened in those chaotic final moments. The investigation began at the crime scene itself. Detectives meticulously combed through Mackenzie's apartment, cataloging every detail. The veranda where her body was found was a focal point, marked by bloodstains and the shattered remnants of a knife. Forensic teams collected the fragments, knowing they could hold critical clues about the weapon and its wielder. Inside the apartment, officers found signs of a disturbance, overturned furniture, scattered belongings, and traces of blood that hinted at a confrontation that had moved from inside to the veranda. Digital evidence also became a cornerstone of the investigation. Mackenzie's phone and social media accounts revealed a trail of fear and desperation. Investigators found messages between Mackenzie and Thompson showing they had been in contact since his release. Some exchanges were tense, others oddly amicable, suggesting a complex dynamic. Thompson had also messaged people close to Mackenzie's new partner, attempting to gather information or assert control. These communications, pulled from servers and cross-referenced with phone records, showed he had breached the AVO multiple times. Detectives also explored Mackenzie's broader relationships. They interviewed her mother, Tabitha, who shared her daughter's fears about Thompson. In a statement to the court, later reported by the Newcastle Herald, Tabitha said, "Mackenzie lived in constant fear after Thompson's release." Mackenzie told Tabitha he wouldn't let her go. Friends echoed this, describing how Mackenzie had confided in them about Thompson's persistent attempts to reconnect. One friend told police she wanted to protect her son but felt trapped, like there was no way out. During police questioning, Thompson's statements were guarded but revealing. According to court reports, later cited by the Newcastle Herald, he claimed the incident was a chaotic misunderstanding. He admitted to being at Mackenzie's apartment that night despite the AVO but insisted he had been invited. He described an argument that escalated, alleging that Mackenzie had been the aggressor, wielding a knife in a heated moment. His account painted a picture of self-defense, claiming his hand injury came from trying to disarm her. Though his story shifted under scrutiny, with inconsistencies about the sequence of events, he denied any intent to harm her. However, his explanation struggled to align with the physical evidence: the broken knife, Mackenzie's fatal injuries, and witness accounts of her desperation to escape. Detectives pressed Thompson about his actions in the days leading up to the incident, confronting him with evidence of his repeated AVO breaches, including messages and calls to Mackenzie and her associate. Thompson downplayed these breaches, claiming he was trying to sort things out and maintain a connection for the sake of their shared history. As Thompson remained in custody, the investigation continued to solidify the case. Forensic reports confirmed Mackenzie's blood on the knife and Thompson's DNA on the handle, strengthening the link to the crime. The autopsy of Mackenzie Anderson revealed she suffered 78 stab wounds inflicted in less than 3 minutes. On March 27, 2022, Thompson was formally charged with murder, breaching an AVO, and related offenses stemming from the events of that night. The murder charge was anchored by compelling evidence: knife fragments bearing Mackenzie's blood, witness accounts of her screams, and Thompson's presence at the scene with a suspicious injury. Additional charges included intimidating behavior, reflecting his pattern of harassment in the weeks prior. The motive, while not explicitly stated by Thompson, emerged through the investigation's findings. Detectives and domestic violence experts consulted concluded Thompson's actions stemmed from a need to regain control of Mackenzie, who was trying to move on with her life and protect her son. The presence of Mackenzie's male friend that night may have been a catalyst, intensifying Thompson's fixation. The charges against Thompson were a step toward justice. They also highlighted the failures that allowed him to remain a threat. By early 2025, the case had reached a critical juncture in the Newcastle Supreme Court, where the pursuit of justice for the 21-year-old mother unfolded. Initially set for a 4-week trial starting April 7, 2025, the case took a dramatic turn when Tyrone Thompson, then 25, changed his plea on April 1, 2025, in the New South Wales Supreme Court. He pleaded guilty to the domestic violence murder of Mackenzie Anderson, halting the need for a full trial. This plea came after years of denials, during which he had maintained his innocence even as evidence mounted against him. The guilty plea was a significant moment, sparing Mackenzie's family the pain of a protracted trial, but shifting the focus to the sentencing hearing, where the court would determine the consequences of his actions. The hearing, presided over by Justice Richard Weinstein, became a pivotal moment for all involved. The prosecution, led by Crown Prosecutor Brendan Queenan, presented a harrowing case. They argued that Thompson's actions on March 25, 2022, were a brutal culmination of a pattern of control and violence. Court documents detailed how Thompson, on parole for prior domestic violence offenses against Mackenzie, ignored an apprehended violence order and broke into her Mayfield apartment twice that night. Using 2 kitchen knives, he stabbed her 78 times in less than 3 minutes, an attack so ferocious that one knife snapped. The prosecution emphasized Mackenzie's vulnerability, noting her repeated attempts to seek safety through advocacy groups and her fear that Thompson would harm her after his release. The defense, representing Thompson, acknowledged the gravity of his actions, but sought leniency by highlighting mitigating factors. They argued that Thompson's mental health issues and challenging background diminished his moral culpability. His legal team submitted that he was not psychotic at the time of the crime, but struggled with emotional instability, which contributed to the escalation. Then, an apology letter from Thompson was tendered, in which he expressed regret, stating, "No words can undo the pain and devastation he caused to someone he genuinely loved." However, the prosecution challenged this, with Queenan noting there is some element of victim blaming. Justice Weinstein, wary of the letter's sincerity, remarked that it offered limited insight into true remorse. On May 1, 2025, Justice Weinstein delivered the sentence. Thompson was jailed for a maximum of 22 years 6 months, with a non-parole period of 15 years 6 months, making him eligible for parole in 2038. The The judge described the attack as a frenzied act of such ferocity that it left Mackenzie's family shattered. Noting their helplessness, despair, and anger, he acknowledged the aggravating factors, including Thompson's prior violence and Mackenzie's fear, but also considered his guilty plea and personal circumstances when setting the term. The sentence sparked immediate outrage from Mackenzie's family, particularly her mother, Tabitha Ackett. Outside the Newcastle Supreme Court, she collapsed in tears, telling reporters that whilst it might be thought of as a good outcome for the courts, they were disgusted that that sentence was what they thought the value of her daughter's life was worth. She called the sentence an insult to women globally and demanded an appeal. On May 14, 2025, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions announced it would appeal Thompson's sentence, arguing that it was manifestly inadequate given the severity of the crime. Tabitha welcomed the decision, stating, "This is the first hurdle to getting a sentence that is more in line with community and moral standards." The appeal, set for a 2-hour hearing in the Court of Criminal Appeal on August 8, 2025, aims to increase Thompson's jail time. Prosecutors are citing the need to set a stronger precedent against domestic violence offenders. The case's current status leaves Thompson in prison, awaiting the appeal's outcome. While Mackenzie's family continues their advocacy, the appeal could reshape the sentence, but no verdict can undo the loss. For Mackenzie's son, now in the care of relatives and her loved ones, the fight is as much about honoring her memory as it is about ensuring others don't suffer the same fate. The question lingers: will the legal system deliver a punishment that reflects the true cost of Mackenzie's life, or will it fall short again? On June 28, 2023, local authorities in Andover received a call from a worried resident. The caller was concerned about his elderly neighbor, Stuart, who had not been seen outside for several days. Stuart was known for his regular routine and interactions with others, making his sudden disappearance concerning. His front door was closed, and he had missed his usual walks. Officers were sent to the location, and after getting legal permission, they entered the house. Upon entering, they were immediately greeted by a strong odor. The house seemed to be occupied, but was in disarray. Their attention was drawn to the living room, where they found the man's body on the floor, partially covered by a white sheet. A fan was on, running at full speed and directed right at the body. The arrangement of the room sparked many questions. A turned-off cell phone was located on the coffee table next to its charger. Handwritten notes, some with aggressive or hostile statements, were scattered on the floor and were collected for further forensic examination. There were no indications of forced entry or theft, as valuable items remained undisturbed. Close to the body was a small Pomeranian dog that seemed calm and showed no visible injuries. Investigators discovered signs of illegal substances in the kitchen, including used syringes, packaging materials, and remnants of unknown substances. These items were thoroughly recorded and sent for lab analysis. There were no blood traces found on the walls or furniture, but the body's condition suggested that death occurred several days earlier. The level of decomposition and changes in the skin confirmed this timeline. Additionally, the body's position and markings on the arms indicated a possible attempt at self-defense. Right from the beginning, it was clear that this was not a natural death. Several factors raised serious concerns: the position of the body, the state of the room, the running fan, the notes, and the dog left alone. As a result, the authorities began a comprehensive investigation. The investigation quickly established that the body found was that of Stuart Crocker, a 62-year-old man who was found dead in his small home, which he had owned for many years. He was a retired British Army veteran receiving a military pension. Although he lived alone, he kept in regular touch with his family, including his children and ex-spouse. Those who knew him described Stuart as kind, calm, and always ready to assist others. He had no known conflicts with his neighbors or relatives. During the initial investigation, detectives reviewed footage from surveillance cameras on nearby homes, One video showed an unknown woman entering the residence approximately 5 days before the body was discovered. After her departure, there were no recordings of anyone else entering the home. Interviews later showed that a few weeks before his death, Stewart had permitted a woman to stay with him. His family did not know the details about how she came to be there. He had only briefly mentioned that he was helping out an acquaintance who had no place to stay. None of his relatives remembered her name, and there was no further information available. According to his ex-wife, Stewart referred to this situation as providing temporary help to someone in need, but he did not explain their relationship further. Neighbors reported seeing a young woman at the house, frequently with a dog, smoking on the porch. They mentioned an increase in noise, including occasional shouting, but no specific aggressive incidents were observed. Her behavior appeared odd. She often arrived and left at irregular hours, came back with shopping bags, talked on the phone a lot, and sometimes filmed herself. During the investigation of the cell phone found at the scene, detectives discovered an active TikTok account belonging to the woman who had been living with Stewart Crocker in the weeks before his death. The account named Winter contained numerous videos posted throughout June 2023, some of which were uploaded after the estimated date of Crocker's death and were clearly recorded in the room where his body would later be found. In one video, Winter spoke directly to her viewers, introduced herself, and mentioned that she was taking a break from posting. With a casual smile, she concluded her message by saying she has been a bad girl, appearing carefree as if nothing serious had occurred. In a separate video, she expressed that she felt hungry and mentioned she was going out to buy groceries. The setting matched the area where Crocker's body was discovered. Location data and footage from neighborhood security cameras confirmed that she did leave the house after recording the video. She went to a nearby grocery store where she bought food and a leash for her small dog. A witness at the store observed her talking to a man she seemed to know. During their conversation, she claimed she would soon be famous, saying, "People are going to hear about me." She appeared calm and relaxed, showing no signs of panic or any intention to escape. On social media, Winter often shared her love for a small Pomeranian named Oblivion. The dog regularly appeared in her videos and captions. She mentioned that she loved the dog more than people, referring to it as the only one you can trust. Videos featuring the dog continued to be shared even after Crocker's death, suggesting that she may have stayed in the home for several days after the incident. Her phone not only contained videos, but also several messages, including drafts of letters to a man named Edward Jones, 44. In these messages, she detailed the incident and took full responsibility for Crocker's death, mentioning that she stayed near the body while writing. She also expressed her intention to write a book about her experience, believing it would bring her fame and money. The messages convey a boastful tone, with no indication of remorse or mention of self-defense. The investigation also included video clips showing Winter trying to provoke Crocker into a conversation by asking unrelated questions to elicit specific responses. In the videos, Crocker appeared confused and did not show any aggression, frequently stating that he didn't understand what was happening. None of the footage revealed any hostile behavior from him. Investigators created an initial understanding of the events based on the evidence they gathered. Following Crocker's death, Winter continued to reside in his home, using his belongings without hesitation and posting about it online. Winter Swan Miller was born on November 13, 1986. Her mother worked diligently to support them, aiming to create a stable and calm home despite financial challenges. Winter later reflected positively on this time, noting that her mother was her primary source of support and her closest companion. Her father was not present in her life until she was about 7 years old. He re-entered her life unexpectedly. He lived in Cornwall, far from her home, but started taking her during school breaks. Unfortunately, instead of being caring, these visits caused her emotional distress. He often made hurtful comments, criticizing her appearance and expressing disappointment in her. These negative remarks damaged her self-esteem, and made her feel rejected, insecure from an early age. To gain her father's approval, Winter tried changing her appearance, thinking it would make him accept her. However, he remained indifferent. At school, she faced bullying, social pressure, and loneliness. During this time, her emotional struggles became evident as she withdrew from social interactions, lost interest in school, and started skipping classes. Instead of helping her, her father made things worse by promoting aggressive behavior, escalating conflicts, and reinforcing negative beliefs. The most concerning incident happened when he took her away without her mother's permission. For almost 5 months, no one knew where she was. When Winter came back, she was in very poor condition, both physically and emotionally. She later spoke about having experiences during that time that were clearly wrong and have left her with lasting emotional wounds. From her perspective, her father's behavior indicated troubling intentions that were far from what a caring parent would show. Although these allegations were never officially recorded, the psychological effects were clear. After she was reunited with her mother, she lost all contact with her father, but the harm had already been done. Winter did not get the support she needed from social services or educational systems. Due to her experiences, she developed a deep mistrust of others, a persistent feeling of danger, and a defensive attitude, even in safe situations. By her teenage years, these patterns of emotional detachment, avoidance, and instability had become firmly established. At school, Winter was considered a troubled teenager. However, her behavior was not due to aggression, but rather a profound lack of emotional safety. The traumas she experienced were never adequately addressed, leading to instability that went unnoticed at the time. By the age of 15, Winter had entirely withdrawn from the formal education system. After numerous absences and worsening conflicts at school, she decided to stop her studies altogether. Although her mother attempted to support her education through home tutoring, outside influences had already eclipsed their efforts. Winter found herself surrounded by banned substance, inappropriate behavior, and relationships with much older individuals. At 14, she became involved with a man in his mid-20s who was over a decade older than her. This relationship had a clear power imbalance. He manipulated her psychologically, controlling her daily choices and appearance. He often made demeaning comments, highlighting her flaws, making her feel inadequate. Instead of support, she experienced constant criticism and emotional isolation. To manage her rising internal stress, Winter increasingly turned to banned substance. What started as casual use quickly escalated into a regular habit and eventually addiction. Her efforts to quit often resulted in setbacks, making it harder for her to navigate daily life and maintain emotional stability. During this period, Winter also began changing partners frequently. These relationships became more about transactions such as housing, financial assistance, or using banned substance together than genuine emotional connections. This pattern created a cycle of instability that she couldn't break free from. In 2009, at the age of 23, Winter was involved in a legal case after being charged with causing bodily harm. The specific details of the incident were not disclosed, but she received a non-custodial sentence. This incident marked the beginning of a pattern of aggressive behavior in her life. Additionally, issues related to substance use, declining mental health, and an increasing tendency to engage in conflicts contributed to her instability. As Winter's life progressed, she began to pursue unique hobbies, particularly collecting different kinds of bladed items, including knives, brass knuckles, and decorative swords. Her collection expanded steadily over time. The way she showcased these items in her home and frequently referenced them in her writing indicated that her interest went beyond mere aesthetics. They appeared to represent a desire for control and a psychological defense mechanism. Given her overall behavior, this hobby raised alarms among the few individuals who remained in contact with her. During this time, Winter's mental health was quite unstable. She experienced frequent mood swings, intense irritability, and sudden emotional breakdowns. Even though it was clear she was struggling, she chose not to seek professional help. This choice was rooted in her deep mistrust of support systems and her belief that she could handle everything on her own. While this showed her desire to stay in control, it also meant she missed out on important support that could have helped her. As Winter approached a new chapter in her life, she found herself in a vulnerable state. She struggled with unstable relationships, frequent substance use, legal issues, and growing feelings of isolation and inner conflict. About a year after her first legal troubles, Winter experienced a brief period of stability in her life, which coincided with the start of her relationship with a woman. Friends noted that this was the first time Winter had a long-term, stable partnership. Their relationship developed slowly and steadily, without any public drama or sudden changes. Her partner was older and had a calm personality. Importantly, she did not try to control Winter. For the first time, Winter felt emotionally safe and truly accepted. With her newfound stability, Winter started to explore different career options. She began by working as a veterinary assistant and later moved into pet care. As time went on, she honed her grooming skills and began providing dog grooming services. Although the work wasn't consistent, it gave her a sense of purpose and some financial independence. During this period, Winter adopted her own dog, a Pomeranian named Oblivion. She frequently posted photos and videos of him, often expressing that she trusted him more than other people. Winter lived with her partner for approximately 5 years. During this period, she avoided serious legal issues, maintained a small group of friends, and rarely discussed her past. Former acquaintances noted that she appeared calmer and more reserved. However, she did not completely cease using illegal substances. Although it happened less often, it continued to be her method of dealing with stress and anxiety. Her partner's unexpected passing had a profound impact, primarily due to her rapid decline in health. This loss was a significant turning point for Winter. For a long time, she struggled to manage her emotions, turned back to substance use, distanced herself from others, and stopped following her usual routines. During this difficult period, she increasingly sought refuge in digital platforms, particularly TikTok. Her content included a mix of short videos, dancing, lip-syncing, appearances with her dog, and often provocative clips. Occasionally, she would share authentic moments, personal thoughts, emotional outbursts, pleas for help, and feelings of loneliness. As a result, her account quickly gained thousands of followers. The attention, especially from male viewers who complimented her and sent numerous messages, temporarily elevated her self-esteem and made her feel seen. She actively interacted with her audience, fostering engagement. On TikTok, Winter created an alternate persona that appeared confident, vibrant, and daring, while in reality, she was dealing with a severe internal crisis. As her dependency increased, her social media posts became less stable and more chaotic. She began appearing on camera in loungewear, often showing clear signs of emotional exhaustion. Concerned viewers left worried comments on her videos, but Winter usually did not reply. Although it may have looked like she was trying to rebuild her life, it was really an escape from reality. During this period, she became involved in events that would eventually gain significant public attention. By early 2023, Winter was struggling with social and psychological issues. She lacked a reliable income, continued to use illegal substances, and often stayed overnight at various friends' homes. During this difficult period, she met Stuart Crocker, a kind-hearted older man living alone in Andover. They were introduced through a mutual friend involved in informal substance use circles. When Winter shared her situation of being homeless and facing threats from others, Stuart generously offered her a place to stay temporarily. Soon after, Winter moved in with her dog. Stuart willingly helped take care of the pet. The first few days of their cohabitation seemed peaceful. She prepared meals, chatted with him, and took charge of household chores, which seemed like a way of showing appreciation for her accommodation. However, things soon changed. Winter began to involve herself in aspects of Stuart's life that went far beyond their original agreement. At the same time, Stuart's communication with his family started to fade. His sons and ex-wife became increasingly worried as they noticed his spending was rising and his regular contact had almost ceased. When they voiced their concerns, Stewart simply said he was helping someone in need and dismissed their criticism. Attempts by his family to talk to him directly were often blocked by Winter. Over time, Winter began managing Stewart's finances and personal matters. She took care of paperwork for his benefits, used his bank cards, and made purchases, many of which were for her own needs. Although she presented her actions as support and assistance, they actually indicated complete control over his life. In the final weeks of Stewart Crocker's life, he became entirely dependent on someone he thought he could help. During this time, there is no evidence of him showing aggressive behavior or making threats. On June 23, 2023, a significant incident occurred at Stewart Crocker's home. The dispute began between Stewart and Winter when she accused him of giving her dog away to strangers, a claim that turned out to be false since the dog was later found unharmed at home. The argument escalated when Winter attacked Stewart with a sharp object, causing multiple injuries mainly on his back, chest, and neck by 26 stab wounds. Defensive wounds on his hands indicated he tried to fend her off. After the initial assault, Winter further restricted his breathing using a handbag strap. The cause of death was identified as a combination of blood loss and mechanical asphyxiation. After the incident, Winter stayed at the scene. She covered Stewart's body with a white sheet, turned on the TV and a fan to direct air at the area, and remained in the house for several more days. On the same day, Winter invited a new friend into the house, even with Stewart's body present. They reportedly used illegal substances together and recorded videos. The next day, they left town and went to Birmingham, where they stayed hidden for 5 days. Winter Swan, Miller 37, was arrested on June 30th without any resistance. The man who was with her at the time of her arrest had no involvement in the crime. He was briefly questioned about unrelated charges concerning the unauthorized use of Crocker's bank cards, but was released soon after. Winter was taken into custody, but during interrogation, she did not cooperate, replying no comment to every question. The investigation collected a significant amount of evidence, including surveillance footage, videos from Winter's TikTok account, handwritten notes, audio recordings, letters, and digital communication. Authorities determined that the act was planned in advance. During the trial in 2024, prosecutors presented all the evidence. In an unexpected turn, the defense changed their story. Winter claimed that Stewart had threatened, manipulated, and violated her personal boundaries. However, these claims were not backed by medical records or prior complaints. In her letters, following the incident, she did not mention any mistreatment. Instead, her tone was degrading towards the victim and focused on justifying her own actions. Videos recorded by Winter before the incident contradicted her defense, showing Stewart Crocker as calm, not exhibiting any aggression, and reacting to her confrontational questions with confusion, clearly unaware of the implied accusations. The court found that Winter Swan Miller acted intentionally, motivated by self-interest and personal animosity. She was convicted of intentionally causing death under serious circumstances. The judge sentenced her to 23 years in prison. The sentencing statement highlighted the manipulative and premeditated nature of her actions and dismissed any claims of self-defense. Additionally, the court mentioned that she tried to use the incident for her own publicity. The dog discovered at the scene has been relocated to a new family. Animal welfare authorities report that the pet has adapted well and is now in a safe home. Stewart Crocker's funeral was held privately, attended only by close family. During the service, his sons and ex-wife shared heartfelt memories, describing him as kind, generous, and always eager to assist others. They highlighted how his trusting nature ultimately contributed to the tragic event. The case gained significant public interest, especially because of the dramatic social media posts, the lack of remorse shown, and the deliberate nature of the crime. Before the summer of 1988, The Carr family enjoyed a happy life in the small town of Alturas. They were known for their strong faith and attended church every Sunday, embodying a peaceful, trouble-free family. However, their calm life was disrupted on June 14th when 17-year-old Dwayne found a threatening letter in their mailbox. The anonymous note was alarming, warning the family to leave Florida or face serious consequences. Distressed, Dwayne quickly showed the letter to his parents. His mother, Peggy, was filled with fear, while his father, Pi, dismissed it as a prank. As summer transitioned into fall, the family's anxiety increased, peaking on October 23rd when Peggy suddenly became seriously ill. She suffered from intense nausea and severe pain, and strikingly, her hair began to fall out in large clumps. Despite her worsening condition, Pi insisted on not taking Peggy to the hospital, thinking it was just a temporary illness. However, Peggy's health rapidly deteriorated, and within a week, she fell into a coma. To make matters worse, Dwayne started showing the same troubling symptoms as his mother. This alarming situation led to a police investigation. On December 2nd, authorities made a shocking discovery. The sickness affecting the Carr family was caused by thallium, a deadly chemical often used in rat poison. Tests revealed that every family member, including Pi, had dangerously high levels of this poison in their bodies. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that someone was deliberately targeting the Carr family. The letter they received was not a joke. It was a warning of the danger ahead. Authorities now had to work quickly to identify the person responsible and prevent further harm. Turn back time. In 1988, Dwayne was happily living with his family in the peaceful town of Alturas, Florida. His mother, Peggy, worked hard as a waitress at a local diner. After raising 3 children by herself, she found love with Pi Carr, who had 2 children of his own, creating a blended family. Life in Alturas seemed perfect. It was a quiet place where people left their doors unlocked, ideal for raising a family. However, on October 23rd, everything changed in a tragic way. Early in the morning, Peggy went to work as usual. However, shortly after arriving at the diner, she began experiencing a burning sensation in her legs and feet, followed by severe chest pain. She was quickly taken to the hospital, where her condition left her nearly incapacitated. Despite extensive tests, doctors were unable to determine the cause of her symptoms and sent her home with pain relief medication. A week later, on October 30th, Peggy and Dwayne, along with Dwayne's stepbrother, Travis, were taken to the hospital with severe symptoms. The pain was so intense that they were brought to tears, and they were scared for their lives. Peggy was admitted to the intensive care unit, where an infectious disease specialist noticed something troubling, suggesting possible poisoning. He decided to test for thallium, a toxic substance banned in the U.S. since 1972, but still found in some old rat poisons. The test results were shocking. Peggy had 50 times the deadly amount of thallium in her body. The following day, October 31st, she fell into a coma. Travis needed a respirator, and Dwayne showed no signs of getting better. The police quickly started an investigation with a clear goal: to identify the source of the poisoning and prevent more harm. They searched the orange groves, tested the neighborhood's water supply, and even investigated the diner where Peggy worked, but found no signs of thallium. As news broke, panic spread through the community. Concerned citizens demanded answers, anxious about their safety. Investigators arrived at the Carr home, carefully collecting dust samples and over 400 household items for testing. One item of particular concern was a 6-pack of Coke bottles, 3 of which were unopened. Tests showed that each bottle contained more than a gram of thallium, enough to be lethal to an adult. The lead detective understood that there were 2 possible explanations. Either the Coke had been tampered with at the factory, or it had been contaminated elsewhere. If it was factory tampering, many more people might have consumed the poison, potentially affecting not just the county, but the entire state or even the nation. This fear led locals to hesitate before drinking Coke. The investigation initially targeted the bottling company. However, Thanks to Coca-Cola's cooperation, it was quickly determined that large-scale tampering was not possible. It was found that tampering with the product at the plant could not physically happen. As a result, the police concluded that this was a deliberate attack on Peggy Carr and her family. The investigation focused on family members, with Peggy's husband, Pi Carr, becoming a key suspect. Although they had been married for just 7 months, their initial happiness had faded quickly. Pi spent long hours working at the mine, which made Peggy increasingly suspicious of him. One night, she caught him with another woman, further deepening her concerns. During the weekend that Peggy became ill, Pi happened to be out of town. When he returned, he was reluctant to take her to the hospital. As investigators looked further into Pi's past, they tried to find a reason why he would poison his wife. However, one question continued to trouble the police. Why would Pi also poison his own son, Travis? During the interrogation, Pi shared an intriguing piece of information. On June 14th, 4 months before Peggy got sick, Dwayne discovered a letter in the mailbox. Inside, there was a yellow post-it note with a typewritten warning telling the family to leave Florida within 2 weeks or they would face death. At first, Dwayne and his siblings found it funny, but now Pi's lack of concern appeared more suspicious. The police discovered that unsettling events had previously occurred in the Carr household. A few years earlier, 2 of their dogs had died unexpectedly, showing signs of severe illness and hair loss. This raised a disturbing possibility that they might have been subjected to experimentation. As Peggy's condition worsened, Dwayne and Travis showed no signs of getting better. The entire family was tested for thallium. The results were shocking. Every family member, including Pi Carr, had trace amounts of thallium in their system. This finding ruled Pi out as a suspect, since it seemed unlikely that someone would commit such a crime while also risking their own exposure to the poison. Even Peggy's 2-year-old granddaughter, Casey, had traces of thallium. On March 3, 1989, after 5 months of suffering, Peggy's health took a tragic turn for the worse. Dwayne was summoned to her bedside one last time as the family made the painful decision to take her off life support. Peggy Carr passed away at the age of 41, leaving her family in deep sorrow. Peggy's death shifted the investigation to a murder case. Poisoning is an unusual and deliberate method of killing, typically associated with a particularly clever and disturbed individual. When the FBI examined the contaminated Coke bottles, they discovered tiny scratch marks, suggesting that the bottles had been carefully altered. Thallium had been added, the caps resealed, and the bottles looked untouched. Since thallium is both tasteless and odorless, it dissolves easily without leaving typical signs like overflow, discoloration, or sediment in soda. The careful mixture found in the Coke bottles indicates that the perpetrator possessed advanced chemistry knowledge, an exceptionally intelligent person who thought they were more cunning than everyone else. Police began to interview neighbors and townspeople in Alturas, a small community with only a few hundred residents, as they searched for the person responsible for this terrible crime. The closest neighbors to the Carr family were George James Trepal and his wife, Diana. When detectives questioned Trepal, he reacted with surprising anger, criticizing the redneck children and family living nearby. When asked who anyone would want to harm the Carr family, George gave a disturbingly detailed answer. He believed someone wanted them to move away. This was exactly the same message found in a threatening letter sent to the Carrs, a detail known only to the police. This unusual response led investigators to consider Trepal as a prime suspect. Further investigation revealed that George was a self-taught chemist, while his wife, Diana, held a master's degree in chemistry. Both were part of an elite society for individuals with an IQ in the top 2% of the population. Investigators then uncovered George's criminal history. He had previously served time in prison for his role as the chemist in a large methamphetamine operation. One key ingredient used in making methamphetamine is thallium. The news that George was a person of interest surprised even Peggy's son, Dwayne, who found it hard to believe that Trepal was capable of such a terrible crime. the detectives found out that Treppel had a prior altercation with the Carr family over loud music. Just 2 days after this dispute, Peggy Carr was poisoned. Although there were connections between the two events, the police did not have sufficient evidence to arrest Treppel. Typically, police procedures involve questioning a suspect in hopes of securing a confession. However, detectives felt this tactic would not be effective with Treppel, who is introverted and avoids confrontation. Therefore, the FBI suggested an alternative approach. Someone needed to go undercover to outwit Treppel. The police assigned Special Agent to go undercover in the group that George Treppel was part of. The goal was to earn Treppel's trust and collect enough evidence to demonstrate his involvement in the poisoning. At first, it appeared that the agent would only need to work undercover for a weekend. However, she was cautioned about Treppel's exceptional memory. If he saw her, he might remember her face or car. She, using a fake identity, was getting ready to attend a murder mystery event organized by George Treppel and his wife, Diana. She pretended to be a woman about to divorce her abusive husband. On April 14, 1989, she arrived at the local hotel where the gathering was taking place. As she entered, she was met by George himself. Seeing him, she felt anxious that he might recognize her from previous surveillance. She took a deep breath and looked for any indication that he knew her, but Treppel didn't seem to remember her. Still, she had to stay alert in her undercover role. She understood that Treppel was not likely to confront someone directly. He preferred to poison his victims, leading to a slow and painful death. The agent signed up for the event and received a packet with all the weekend details prepared by Treppel himself. The pamphlet outlined several carefully crafted murder scenarios, including one that involved poisoning. One paragraph caught her attention. It stated that when a death threat arrives, cautious individuals should discard all their food and be mindful of what they consume. This alarming similarity reminded she of the death threat the Carr family had received just before Peggy was poisoned, reinforcing her belief that they had identified the right suspect. Throughout the weekend, the agent spoke with Treppel, carefully monitoring his every word, aware that any mistake could cost her life. When Treppel inquired about her background, she fabricated a story about her husband, a lawyer from Houston, Texas, whom she claimed to have left. Treppel revealed that he could detect lies by observing the movement of a person's neck muscles, which made she even more anxious. Before the weekend concluded, she revealed to Treppel her plan to move to Florida in order to escape her husband. This confession led to an important development. Treppel mentioned that he and his wife were considering relocating their practice and selling their house. After meeting with her supervisors, the agent was told to extend her undercover operation beyond the original weekend. She recognized this as an opportunity to gather important evidence that could lead to a search warrant for Treppel's house. Her goal was to find lab equipment or chemicals that would connect Treppel to the crime. The next week, she visited Treppel's house. During the visit, Treppel bragged about how safe Alturas was and how nobody locked their doors. While she spotted several suspicious items, such as a secret passage in the library and a mannequin dressed in bondage gear, none of these were enough to obtain a search warrant. Despite her failed plan, the agent continued to act, committed to collecting more evidence. She understood the dangers involved. Revealing her real identity could put her and her family at risk. Treppel, who was very clever, might resort to poisoning her if he found out she was an undercover detective. Over the next few months, she met with Treppel for several lunch dates, always being watched closely. She avoided eating or drinking anything after leaving the table, cautious of Treppel's potential to harm her. During these meetings, Treppel progressively showed his contempt for those he deemed less intelligent, which provided she with a glimpse into his mindset. After 8 months, the agent had gathered many small pieces of evidence, but it wasn't enough to form a strong case. Her supervisors started to doubt the operation's worth and considered shutting it down. For the agent, giving up was not an option. She felt a deep responsibility to seek justice for Peggy Carr and her family, thinking about how it could have been her own loved ones who ingested the poison. In December 1989, the agent received an important call she had been anticipating. George and Diana Trepal had relocated and offered her the opportunity to move into their home. With this offer, the agent gained legal permission to enter the house without needing a warrant, allowing her to invite the county crime scene unit to conduct an investigation. Suspecting that Trepal was too intelligent to leave obvious signs of thallium, the investigation team concentrated on searching for residues in areas such as the air conditioning filter and drains. The house still contained many of Trepal's belongings, which provided plenty of chances to collect samples. In the garage, investigators found vials and chemistry bottles, hoping that one of them would test positive for thallium. While waiting for results from the FBI lab, the agent struggling to come up with new ways to engage Trepal. As time passed, she realized that by January 1990, with no updates from the lab, she needed to take matters into her own hands. She aimed to trick Trepal into incriminating himself, not knowing that he was preparing his own deception. The agent scheduled a meeting with Trepal at a picnic area behind a McDonald's, near where he lived. This important meeting was recorded. During their discussion, she gave Trepal a business card that she claimed had been left by detectives looking for him. Trepal reacted noticeably. He became very anxious and visibly unsettled as he tried to stay calm. He repeatedly invited she to visit his new house, but she declined. The atmosphere was tense, leaving one to wonder what would have happened if she had accepted his invitation. After the meeting, Trepal appeared visibly shaken and deeply impacted by the news from her. This marked a critical moment in the investigation. On April 4, 1990, the agent received an unexpected phone call. The FBI had found thallium in one of the vials taken from Trepal's garage. The vial contained thallium nitrate, the same chemical used to poison Peggy Carr and to try to kill her entire family. This discovery provided crucial evidence to bolster the case against Trepal. On April 5th, George Trepal was arrested at his new home in Seguin. Seeing him led into the county jail in an orange jumpsuit marked the conclusion of a lengthy and dangerous investigation. Even when the agent revealed her true identity, Trepal remained calm. The special agent from the county sheriff's office presented him with a warrant for handwriting samples, to which Trepal simply smiled and said, "Oh, okay." She had narrowly escaped becoming Trepal's next victim. In January 1991, George Trepal's trial began with substantial evidence against him. Police found a journal in Trepal's home called General Poisoning Guides, which identified thallium as a common poison used by criminals. The journal included references to harming neighbors, and 55 fingerprints found in it matched Trepal's. The prosecution also presented the tools used to tamper with the Coke bottles, including a set of tiny screwdrivers. One screwdriver was missing and fit perfectly with the marks on the bottle caps, which was incriminating evidence that shocked the jury. Throughout the trial, Trepal maintained a calm and emotionless demeanor, even smiling at times. His lack of remorse and his premeditated actions revealed a disturbing level of malice. He rationalized his cruel actions by claiming he was more intelligent than others and believed that those he deemed less intelligent did not have the right to live. The trial lasted for 2 months, but the jury took only 4 hours to reach a decision. On March 6, 1991, nearly 2 years after Peggy Carr's death, George Trepal was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to death. According to the Florida Department of Corrections, inmates on death row wait an average of 12.7 years for execution. Trepal passed that milestone nearly 8 years ago. With this verdict, justice was served for Peggy Carr. The special agent's unwavering dedication and bravery played a crucial role in bringing this criminal to justice. She put her life at risk to ensure that Trepal was held accountable for his horrific actions. Reflecting on her commitment, one can't help but admire her courage. She went above and beyond to ensure that Peggy's killer faced justice, earning the respect and gratitude of many. The other members of Peggy Carr's family, who also experienced poisoning, fully recovered. However, the loss of Peggy deeply affected her son Dwayne. Losing his mother at just 16 years old was a traumatic event that left him with lasting emotional pain. In the years after her passing, Duane struggled with his grief, frequently expressing it through anger and emotional outbursts. Eventually, he discovered comfort in writing letters to his mother, where he shared his feelings. He promised to work on improving his life. Duane fulfilled his promise. Today, he is married and is the supportive father his family needs. Each day, he works hard to make his mother proud and honor her memory. Duane exemplifies the strength of the human spirit, proving that even after facing great tragedy, it is possible to live a meaningful life. Caitlin Coons first met Jonathan Jones when she was only 15 years old, and he was 30. Their relationship would soon spiral into something deeply troubling. Caitlin, who had spent much of her young life in Ohio's foster care system, she was living in a group home in Canton when she first encountered Jonathan. She had faced numerous challenges throughout her childhood, bouncing between foster families and care facilities. She desperately seeking stability and someone who would truly care for her. Like many children in state custody, she had experienced multiple placements, each bringing its own disappointments. These constant moves had left her feeling abandoned, creating deep emotional wounds that made her vulnerable. Caitlin couldn't help but hope that each new placement would provide the loving, stable environment she craved, but these hopes were repeatedly dashed. Jonathan, 15 years her senior, seemed to offer the attention and affection that Caitlin had been searching for. However, their relationship was far from appropriate or legal. At 30, Jonathan was a grown man who should have known better than to pursue a romantic relationship with a 15-year-old girl. Caitlin couldn't help but be drawn to someone who appeared to understand her struggles and offered her the emotional connection she had been craving. What she didn't realize was that she was becoming involved with a predatory man who would ultimately lead her down a dark and destructive path. As their relationship developed, it became increasingly clear that Jonathan was taking advantage of Caitlin's vulnerable state. Caitlin's unstable past made her emotionally vulnerable, and she became dependent on Jonathan, who took advantage of her youth and desire for love. Jonathan manipulated Caitlin by exploiting her weaknesses. He told her she was mature, different, and their relationship was special. These tactics are commonly used by predators to make victims feel responsible for their own exploitation. Jonathan had complete control, and Caitlin became isolated, making it difficult for her to see that she was being manipulated and believed their relationship was genuine. Even though there were clear warning signs, her longing for love and inexperience with healthy relationships blinded her to the fact that she was being victimized. She saw Jonathan as her rescuer, the one finally giving her the love she desired. In March 2023, Jonathan's predatory behavior was exposed when he was convicted of enticing a child to view adult material and child endangerment. The court found that he had engaged in intimate with 15-year-old Caitlin and planned to sell photographs of their encounters. This revealed the extent of his exploitation and abuse. After the conviction, the court had ordered him to stay away from Caitlin and put a GPS tracker on him to monitor his location. Despite these efforts, tragedy was unavoidable. Nicole Jones, Jonathan's 53-year-old mother, lived in Sylvania Township. She was very worried about her son's relationship with the teenage girl, Caitlin. She was concerned about Jonathan's legal problems and the negative impact the relationship was having on both of them. As a caring mother, Nicole had seen her adult son making increasingly bad choices. She had tried to support him, but his relationship with a teenager and the resulting legal issues were almost too much to bear. Nicole felt stuck between her love for her son and her duty to protect a vulnerable young girl. The seriousness of the situation and the potential consequences of Jonathan's actions made her even more anxious. As a mother, Nicole had always tried to see the best in Jonathan, even when his behavior was clearly problematic. However, his relationship with Caitlin represented a new level of concern. The teenage girl was undeniably vulnerable and traumatized, and Jonathan appeared to be exploiting someone who needed protection. Nicole felt a sense of responsibility. not only for her son's actions, but also for Caitlin's welfare. She had repeatedly talked to Jonathan about the inappropriate nature of his relationship, pointing out the age difference and legal ramifications. She remained steadfast in her belief that Jonathan needed to end the relationship and seek help for the issues, driving him to pursue someone so young and vulnerable. In April 2023, despite the court order, Caitlin made the fateful decision to leave her foster care placement in Canton. The 17-year-old girl, still deeply attached to Jonathan, couldn't resist what she believed was love. She met Jonathan at a local restaurant, and together they returned to his mother's home in Sylvania Township. Caitlin hoped this reunion would somehow make everything better, that they could find a way to be together without further problems. Nicole didn't know that Caitlin was secretly living in her house. Caitlin had climbed in through Jonathan's bedroom window and was hiding from Nicole. This created a stressful and difficult situation, as Caitlin was living a secret life in Nicole's home, where Nicole was trying to live normally. This situation put a strain on everyone. Nicole was unaware of everything happening in her own home, and it was becoming harder to keep Caitlin hidden. Caitlin had to stay quiet during the day and avoid being seen. Caitlin grew frustrated with the secrecy and the constant fear of being discovered, and she realized that this situation couldn't last. As days passed, the strain of keeping Caitlin's presence hidden became increasingly difficult. Jonathan knew it was only a matter of time before his mother discovered Caitlin's presence, and he knew his mother would not approve. It was evident that Nicole was genuinely concerned about both Jonathan's welfare and Caitlin's. However, her attempts to intervene and protect them would ultimately put her in grave danger. The tension in the household reached a breaking point when Caitlin became convinced that Nicole was the primary obstacle to her being with Jonathan. Warped by trauma and manipulation, Caitlin was unable to see that Nicole's concerns were legitimate and protective. Instead, she viewed Nicole as an enemy, deliberately trying to destroy her relationship. This perception fueled increasingly dark thoughts about how to eliminate the perceived obstacle. On April 19, 2023, Caitlin's frustration and desperation reached a dangerous crescendo. She made a decision that would forever change multiple lives. Caitlin gave Jonathan an ultimatum that was both shocking and terrifying in its cold calculation. Jonathan had 5 hours to kill his own mother, Nicole, or she would end their relationship forever. This demand was so extreme and disturbing that it revealed the depth of Caitlin's psychological disturbance and the toxic nature of their relationship. Jonathan, faced with this impossible choice, found himself paralyzed by fear and indecision. Although he had made numerous poor choices in his life, including his predatory relationship with Caitlin, the prospect of murdering his own mother was apparently beyond even his moral boundaries. As the 5-hour deadline approached, Jonathan could not bring himself to harm the woman who had given him life and had tried to help him throughout his struggles. Caitlin wanted Jonathan to kill Nicole. When he refused, she gave him an extra hour, hoping he would change his mind, but Jonathan still didn't act. So, Caitlin decided she would kill Nicole herself. She believed that for her relationship with Jonathan to work, Nicole had to die. Despite feeling troubled and pressured, she resolved to commit the murder since Jonathan wouldn't. On the evening of April 19, 2023, Nicole Jones stood in her kitchen, facing her refrigerator. Unbeknownst to her, Caitlin was outside and had found a large rock. Caitlin brought the rock inside, intending to use it as a weapon. Nicole continued her usual evening routine, completely unaware that Caitlin was about to end her life in a shocking and violent way. Her kitchen, normally a place of comfort, was about to become the scene of a brutal crime. As Nicole stood with her back turned, focused on whatever she was retrieving from the refrigerator, Caitlin approached from behind with the rock in her hands. In a moment of pure evil and violence, Caitlin began bludgeoning Nicole over the head with the rock, striking her multiple times with brutal force. The attack was swift and merciless, giving Nicole no opportunity to defend herself or even understand what was happening. As if the bludgeoning wasn't enough to ensure Nicole's death, Caitlin then strangled her, making certain that she would never again interfere in her relationship with Jonathan. Jonathan was in the living room when his girlfriend, Caitlin, murdered his mother in the kitchen. Instead of calling for help or trying to save her, Jonathan chose to help Caitlin hide the crime. This decision made him an accomplice in a shocking murder case. They worked together to dispose of Nicole's body. They drove to 2 local stores, purchasing a tarp and garbage bags to wrap Nicole's lifeless body. They returned to the house and wrapped Nicole's body in the materials they had purchased. After wrapping the body, Jonathan and Caitlin loaded Nicole into the trunk. In perhaps one of the most disturbing details of this case, prosecutors later revealed that Jonathan and Caitlin actually went out to dinner while Nicole's body remained in the trunk. Following their dinner, they drove to a nearby apartment complex and disposed of Nicole's body in a dumpster, treating her as mere garbage to be discarded. The dumpster was collected the following day as part of the normal garbage pickup, and Nicole's body was taken to a landfill. Even though law enforcement searched thoroughly, Nicole's body was never found. This prevents her family from having the closure they would get from a proper burial. With Nicole's body disposed of, Jonathan and Caitlin decided to flee the area to avoid prosecution. They took Nicole's 2021 Buick Encore and began driving west, eventually crossing the border into Mexico. Along with the car, they also took Nicole's social security card, identification, credit cards, and health insurance card, essentially stealing her identity along with her life. However, their escape was short-lived. Caitlin, perhaps overwhelmed by the magnitude of her actions, made a critical error that would lead to their capture. While on the run, she contacted one of her caregivers and confessed to the murder, admitting that she had killed Jonathan's mother. This confession prompted the caregiver to immediately contact law enforcement, who began working with U.S. Marshals to track down Jonathan and Caitlin. The search for Jonathan and Caitlin became an international manhunt, with law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border cooperating to locate them. Fortunately for investigators, Jonathan was still wearing the Jeep's tracking device, mandated as part of his earlier conviction. This device allowed authorities to track their movements and ultimately locate them in the municipality of Ahumada, in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico, on May 8, 2023, approximately 3 weeks after Nicole's murder. U.S. Marshals and Mexican authorities successfully apprehended both Jonathan and Caitlin. They were found in possession of Nicole's vehicle and personal documents, providing further evidence of their guilt. Jonathan and Caitlin was extradited back to the United States to face charges for their roles in Nicole's brutal murder. Before, back in Ohio, law enforcement had been conducting a thorough investigation into Nicole's disappearance and presumed death. The investigation had begun on May 5, 2023, when Canton Police contacted Sylvania Township Police, requesting a welfare check on Nicole Jones. When officers arrived at her condominium, they were unable to locate her, despite conducting a thorough search of the premises. As the investigation unfolded, the true horror of what had transpired became clear. Detective Jake Albright of the Sylvania Township Police Department interviewed Caitlin extensively after her arrest, and she provided detailed confessions about how she had murdered Nicole. The case against both Caitlin and Jonathan was overwhelming. In addition to Caitlin's confessions, investigators had Jeep's tracking data from Jonathan's ankle monitor that corroborated the timeline of events and their movements after the murder. Surveillance footage from the stores where they purchased supplies further supported the prosecution's case against them. Initially, prosecutors charged Caitlin with aggravated murder, abuse of a corpse, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. Given the serious nature of the charges and the calculated manner in which the crime was committed, the court decided to charge Caitlin as an adult. Despite her being only 17 at the time of the murder, Jonathan faced even more charges, including 2 counts of aggravated murder, felonious assault, aggravated burglary, aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. However, as the case moved through the legal system, both defendants ultimately decided to accept plea agreements rather than face trial. On June 4, 2024, both Caitlin Coons, now 18, and Jonathan Jones, 33, appeared in Lucas County Common Police Court before judge. They each pleaded no contest to charges of aggravated murder and abuse of a corpse. As part of the plea agreement, prosecutors agreed to dismiss the remaining charges against both defendants. The judge sentenced each of them to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. While this sentence ensures that both will spend decades behind bars, it also means that they could potentially be released while still relatively young, a thought that brings little comfort to Nicole's grieving family. During the sentencing hearing, the impact of Nicole's murder on her family became painfully clear. Nicole's brother, Robert Jones, who is the administrator of her estate, spoke about the devastating effect her loss has had on their family. Lucas County Prosecutor Julia Bates addressed the case following the sentencing, acknowledging the horror of what had transpired and expressing hope that the resolution would bring some measure of peace to Nicole's family. She said, "This was a horrific event." In her statement, they are relieved to reach a resolution in this case. They hope this brings some measure of peace to Nicole Jones's family. May her memory forever live in their hearts. As a result of this case, Robert Jones, representing Nicole's estate, has filed a civil lawsuit against Caitlin and Jonathan for wrongful death. The lawsuit seeks $25,000 in damages, in addition to punitive damages and other expenses. The suit acknowledges that no amount of money can truly make up for Nicole's death and the way it occurred. A tragic part of this case is that Nicole's body has never been found. Her family has been deprived of the fundamental right to give her a proper burial and have a place to remember and honor her. Not knowing where Nicole's remains are located intensifies their suffering. This case serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences that can result from predatory relationships and the exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Caitlin, who began as a victim of Jonathan's inappropriate pursuit when she was just 15, ultimately became a perpetrator of one of the most brutal murders imaginable. While this transformation does not excuse her actions, it highlights the complex dynamics that can develop when adults prey upon children who are already struggling with trauma and instability. The residents of Sylvania Township, especially those in Nicole's condominium complex, were deeply disturbed by the terrible crime. Many residents are elderly and had moved there because they thought it was a safe and peaceful place to live. The shocking murder of their neighbor by her son and his teenage girlfriend destroyed their feeling of safety and showed that violence can happen anywhere, even in quiet communities. As this case comes to a close with the sentencing of both perpetrators, Nicole Jones's family continues to struggle with their immense loss. It was evident to everyone that Nicole Jones was a caring mother who had tried to protect both her son and the teenage girl her son was exploiting. Her concern for their welfare ultimately cost her life as she became the victim of a crime so brutal and senseless that it continues to shock all who learn about it. It was a quiet December night. The children were asleep, and the house was peaceful. However, something terrible was happening behind a closed door. By the next day, Lindsay Quay had disappeared. There were no phone calls, no notes, just silence and a strange account from the man who lived with her. Initially, no one knew what to make of it, but as time went on, the truth began to emerge. What really occurred that night in Southport? Lindsay Wilson was born in the seaside town of Southport, near Liverpool. As one of 6 children in a loving and supportive family, Lindsay flourished in the caring environment provided by her parents. She had a strong bond with her siblings, especially her brother, Peter Wilson, who was just a year older. They shared laughter, secrets, and close friendships. Lindsay had a magnetic personality that attracted others, radiating energy, compassion, and joy. Her life changed dramatically in 1995 Lindsay had first become involved with Mitchell Quay when she was 17 and pregnant by another man. Her brother introduced them. He worked with Mitchell at a local casino. What started as a promising relationship quickly escalated into a passionate romance. Within a week, they were engaged, and just weeks later, they were married. However, the celebration was muted. Mitchell's family was largely absent from the wedding, with only his brother, Laniet Quay, present. On that same day, Lindsay's father witnessed their first argument, a troubling sign of the difficulties that lay ahead, although no one could have anticipated just how severe their challenges would become. Mitchell grew up in Essex, but relocated to Southport as a teenager after the tragic loss of his mother. With a father frequently absent for work and a younger brother to look after, Mitchell had to mature quickly and face life on his own. This hardship transformed into a more troubling side of his character. In the early stages of his marriage, Mitchell's initial charm disappeared, revealing a harsh and unyielding personality. He became possessive and unpredictable, insisting that everything go his way. Lindsay, who had hoped for a stable life, now felt completely trapped. 6 weeks after the wedding, Lindsay's daughter, Robin, was born. Mitchell began to disappear for days at a time, leaving Lindsay and Robin while he pursued affairs and wild nights. When he returned, he brought roses and offered apologies. This created a cycle of abuse that only grew tighter. Desperate to hold on to the man she once loved, Lindsay repeatedly forgave him. However, each forgiveness made her feel more diminished. Mitchell's control over her became more deceptive. He started to distance her from everyone important in her life: friends, siblings, and even her father, who had always been her protector. Gradually, he made himself the sole influence in her life. Lindsay found herself increasingly isolated, with every escape route blocked by the man who claimed to love her. 18 months after they married, Lindsay sought to escape her situation and turned to a local support center for single mothers, where she found a place to live. For a short time, she felt some relief. However, Mitchell tracked her down, filled with apologies, promises, and tears, which led them back into the same toxic cycle. Lindsay returned home, and soon after, she became pregnant again. Hoping this new start might bring change, she approached her pregnancy with quiet determination. She might have believed that the baby could transform Mitchell. Victims of abuse often suffer from misplaced guilt, feeling as though they triggered the pain they endure. Unfortunately, nothing improved. Lindsay's mum reveals she stopped visiting her daughter because she didn't want to see Mitchell, and that the last time she saw her was on December 13th. On Christmas Eve, Mitchell visited Mrs. Wilson to collect the children's presents and told her that Lindsay was getting ready to go out. While the family felt uncomfortable, they weren't overly worried, as her absence had started to feel normal. However, as the holidays went by, without any news from Lindsay, their concern grew stronger. It was 6 weeks before a social worker reported her missing. Due to Lindsay's history of domestic abuse, the police responded quickly. Mitchell claimed that Lindsay had left just before Christmas, when she packed her bags and walked away, never to return. He insisted that she was an adult capable of making her own choices. However, both Lindsay's family and investigators found his account suspicious and doubted his statements. By April the following year, police discovered Mitchell had been withdrawing benefits in Lindsay's name. They arrested him on suspicion of murder, solicitation to cause grievous bodily harm, and fraud. Although he downplayed the seriousness of his actions, his comments unsettled those who heard them. He stated he wouldn't even help her if she were in danger after what she did to him and the kids. As time went on, suspicions about Mitchell intensified. He appeared completely untroubled and showed no signs of sadness. He gave interviews, portraying himself as a victim who had been deserted. However, investigators weren't fooled by his performance. They suspected that Lindsay never left the house alive, but they lacked evidence: no body, no confession, and no clear proof. The central question was, where was Lindsay Quay? While Lindsay's family desperately searched for her, Mitchell seemed to enjoy being in the spotlight. With cameras rolling and reporters watching, he presented himself not as a grieving partner, but as someone who thrived on the attention. Mitchell even sent the detective a Christmas card with a bottle of hair dye and a note telling him to get rid of the gray hair to feel more confident. He reported to the authorities that he had seen Lindsay around town, specifically near shops, and in a black Mercedes with another man. He insisted she was nearby and that he could recognize her, yet no one else ever spotted her. He depicted himself as a victim of suspicion rather than tragedy. His statements were inconsistent and lacked any evidence to support them. Despite thorough forensic investigations, no conclusive evidence was found in the home he had shared with Lindsay. Investigators did discover significant purchases of cleaning supplies, which raised concerns, but without a body or evidence of wrongdoing. The case has reached a standstill. While Mitchell misled the media and law enforcement, Lindsay's family faced overwhelming silence. Her father, Peter, spearheaded a persistent search for her. He distributed flyers throughout neighborhoods to seek help and to confront Mitchell with Lindsay's image daily. He scoured canals, ditches, and muddy woods, holding on to hope but increasingly feeling despair. Peter suspected Mitchell was involved, but without a body, a confession, or any closure, he was left with grief and unanswered questions. Each week, Peter confronted a terrifying reality as he picked up his grandchildren from the man he believed killed his daughter. He maintained a calm voice and neutral expression, but beneath his composed facade was an anger he struggled to contain for Lindsay, for her children, and for the elusive truth. A pivotal moment occurred on June 9th, several months after Lindsay went missing, when police officially declared her dead. On the same day, they arrested Mitchell for her murder. During police questioning, he declined to provide any information, repeating the phrase "no comment." The evidence against him was weak, just bits of circumstantial evidence and a pattern of troubling behavior. Then, unexpectedly, after only one night in custody, Mitchell confessed. He revealed that he had killed Lindsay on December 16, 1998. That evening, they argued in their bedroom, just steps away from where their two young children were sleeping. Lindsay allegedly said she wanted a divorce. Mitchell grabbed her by the neck and held her to the floor for 20 minutes. He then placed her body in the bedroom and sealed the door with a towel to prevent her two children from smelling the corpse. In the following 48 hours, Mitchell committed a horrifying act. In the attic of their family home, he dismembered Lindsay's body. He didn't do this alone. His brother Elliot, who had previously worked in a butcher shop, assisted him. Police believe Elliot's experience helped minimize evidence and avoid mistakes. Elliot Kwai was not known for being independent. Investigators described him as having limited cognitive abilities and likely needing special care. His life centered around his older brother, Mitchell, who had a significant influence on him. Unfortunately, this influence led Elliot into a dark situation. After confessing to a murder, Mitchell guided investigators to where he had hidden the remains of Lindsay. The discoveries were disturbing. Miss Kwai's dismembered body was found in a shallow grave near a roller coaster at Pleasureland in the seaside resort of Southport, Merseyside. Her arms and legs were later found wrapped in plastic bags in separate places on a railway embankment. A bin bag containing her head and hands, believed to have been buried in 200,000 tons of rubbish at a Lancashire landfill site, has never been recovered. One disturbing detail emerged during the investigation. Mitchell likely disposed of Lindsay's remains while out walking with his children. This cold and calculated approach, using casual outings as a disguise, was both unsettling and clever, as he knew how to avoid suspicion. In January 2001, the case went to trial at Liverpool Crown Court. However, before the trial began, Mitchell attempted to change his confession. He claimed he hadn't killed Lindsay, but had only dismembered and discarded her body. His story was so far-fetched that even his own legal team urged him to drop it. Ultimately, Mitchell pleaded guilty to all charges. The court found him guilty not only of murder, but also of obstructing justice and misleading law enforcement. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 17 years. Meanwhile, Elliot received a 7-year sentence. which many members of Lindsay's family felt was too lenient. The outcome brought some relief, but it did not bring peace. Sadly, just 3 months after the sentencing, the family faced another heartbreaking tragedy. Lindsay's brother, Peter Wilson Jr., was found dead in the attic of their childhood home. He had taken his own life, leaving no note, but those who knew him understood the reason. Peter had never forgiven himself for introducing Lindsay to Mitchell. In the months following her death, he fell into a deep depression, isolating himself and overwhelmed by guilt. He often expressed that his life felt meaningless without his sister. Tragically, it was his father, who had already been burdened by Lindsay's loss, who discovered Peter's body. At that time, Peter's fiancée was pregnant, meaning another child would grow up without knowing their father, yet another victim of the devastation caused by Mitchell's actions. In 2017, Mitchell became eligible for parole. Lindsay's daughter, Robin, who was only 22 at the time, started a campaign to stop his release. She created a petition on Facebook that gathered thousands of signatures and became a powerful call for justice. The public's anger contributed to the rejection of Mitchell's parole requests. By 2022, he had been denied parole 3 times. His ongoing manipulative behavior in prison, such as aggressive outbursts and involvement in illegal substances smuggling, reinforced the arguments against his release. Lindsay's children, Robin and Jack, were brought up by Wilson family in a loving and stable environment, which was the kind of upbringing their mother always wished for them. Their story today serves as a powerful reminder that there are often people behind closed doors who are quietly asking for help. Lindsay Kwai's 1998 murder by Mitchell Kwai tore through her family and Southport's quiet streets. Her cheerful spirit, the light to her children, Robin and Jack, was lost in a barbaric act. The pain deepened when her brother, Peter Wilson Jr., took his own life. Despite this, the Wilson family found strength. Robin's courageous fight kept Mitchell in prison, honoring her mother's love. Southport's community rallied, sharing flyers and holding vigils to keep Lindsay's name alive and warn against domestic abuse. Meanwhile, her unrecovered remains leave an ache, but Robin and Jack thrive in the caring home Lindsay always wanted. Her story begs us to notice those trapped in silence, to offer help, and to hold loved ones close before it's too late.